Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Valeria Vivanco. On May 29, 1996 in Chile, Miguel and Jacqueline Vivanco welcomed their third child, a daughter named Valeria. She has two older brothers, Daniel and Michelangelo. The family lived a modest life, supported mainly by Miguel's job at a transport company, while Jacqueline looked after the home and children. Valeria stood out from an early age for her courage and caring nature. In 2014, Valeria's family went through a breakup when her parents decided to divorce. Despite this, they remained close to their children, especially their youngest daughter, Valeria. Her strong desire to help others and her courage inspired her to choose a career that suited her. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in the police academy and graduated in 2016. The following year, she started working at the Metropolitan Homicide Bureau. Valeria was passionate about her work and dedicated herself to serving, always ready to serve. Her courage and dedication earned her the respect of her colleagues, and she was recognized for successfully solving many cases. Notably, on July 21, 2020, she prevented a robbery at a jewelry store and helped take down two dangerous criminals. At that time, Valeria lived with her brother and mother in Kikura Township, where she worked as an assistant inspector. In 2021, Valeria was preparing to celebrate her 25th birthday, and on May 29, her mother threw a big party at her home to mark the occasion. All of Valeria's relatives, friends, and colleagues attended, except for her father, who was not present at the celebration. The following morning in Santa Tomás de la Pina, a search operation began to monitor all traffic entering and leaving the town. This was prompted by the murder of a 20-year-old woman, making it crucial to locate the killer. Information suggested that he might have fled in a Kia. A team consisting of Valeria, Deputy Police Officer Pony, Inspector Marie Ura, and Detective Leonel Canales tracked the suspect's movements. Police Officer Felipe Ara, in a patrol car, skillfully blocked the suspect's path. Valeria and Leonel stepped out of their car when suddenly a shot rang out, hitting Valeria. Despite immediate medical attention and resuscitation efforts at the hospital, Valeria died 2 hours later. Her colleagues informed her family of the tragedy when they arrived at the hospital. The area where the incident occurred was cordoned off, and outsiders were asked to leave. Police were monitoring the scene and arrested two suspects, Miguel Calobra, 19, and his 17-year-old accomplice, who cannot be named due to their age. Valeria's funeral was held in a solemn manner at her workplace. A procession led by her colleagues carried her coffin from the police station to the cemetery. Crowds gathered to say goodbye as the hearse drove away. High-ranking officials attended, including Interior Minister Rodrigo Delgado and Deputy Minister Juan Francisco Gali. A 3-day mourning period was declared at both the police station where Valeria worked and the academy where she studied. Hector Espinosa, head of the Homicide Investigation Department, presented a Chilean flag to Valeria's parents, who displayed it in their home alongside a photo of their daughter. Valeria's death shocked the nation and led to a murder investigation. Police focused on two suspects who were tried in June 2021. During the trial, it emerged that Valeria was not wearing a bulletproof vest that morning and was driving an unmarked car, which made her vulnerable. The attackers shot at Valeria while trying to flee. After the trial, the main suspects were detained for 6 months as the investigation continued. In August 2021, when 3 police officers were suddenly fired, concerns arose about their possible involvement in Valeria's death. On August 2, at the request of the district attorney, Valeria's parents attended a meeting where Inspector Juan Carlos Scara publicly apologized to them on behalf of the police. Valeria was killed by a bullet from a colleague's pistol, causing outrage among Valeria's family. On August 4, representatives of the prosecutor's office revealed the findings of the Homicide Investigation Unit. They indicated that a bullet fired from the police pistol. The 3 police officers who accompanied Valeria that morning may have been involved in her death. In fact, about 2-3 hours after Valeria's death, the police arrested 2 suspects, Miguel Calobra and his 17-year-old accomplice. Miguel admitted to his relatives that he did not shoot Valeria. His mother even filed a statement with the prosecutor's office declaring her son innocent and asking for verification of the facts. On July 29, 2021, the prosecutor received a report from the forensic laboratory. This report revealed that the pistol and bullets that killed Valeria belonged to her associates in that operation. Additionally, on June 17, experts from the Bureau launched an investigation into 3 police officers who were present with Valeria at the time. Police officer Jose Gara reported that gunpowder residue was found on Leonel Contreras' hands. This information reached department management but was not used in the investigation for unclear reasons. With these findings, the prosecutor's office filed an administrative lawsuit against 3 of Valeria's colleagues. They were subsequently suspended from the police force on August 9. The 3 police officers and 2 detained suspects were present at trial. Valeria's relatives were also invited. Felipe Ara spoke first, explaining that just before the gunshots, he was in a position where he saw Valeria. She was the first to get out of the car but turned back to get her keys and weapon. At that moment, a shot rang out, and the criminal's car sped away while Valeria lay on the ground. Then Maria spoke up. The entire group got out of the patrol car. Maria herself reached the corner and heard gunshots. She turned around and saw Valeria lying on the ground. Leonel also spoke up, saying that he got out of the car from the back seat. Valeria, who was in the front passenger seat, she walked diagonally toward the suspects. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and Valeria fell. By evening, the reenactment was complete. The police reported that all the evidence pointed directly to Leonel. On August 10, Miguel Calobra and his 17-year-old friend, who were wrongly accused of Valeria's murder, were released on 2 conditions. They had to sign a written agreement not to leave the city and had to report to police monthly to prove they were abiding by the law. Leonel's lawyer, who disagreed with the investigation's findings, argued that his client was in a difficult position to fire the shot at that time. The current situation has sparked widespread anger in society, leading Valeria's family to hold rallies demanding justice and the arrest of the real killer. Alfredo Morgado, the lawyer for Valeria's family, highlighted the police's behavior in the reconstruction of the events. The 3 police claimed that they did not use weapons that morning, but the head of the police department, Sergio Munoz, denied this claim. Furthermore, 3 police officers involved in the operation repeatedly contradicted their testimony. The parents of those detained also spoke out, accusing the police of trying to frame their children for Valeria's murder. They alleged that their children were beaten while in custody, and that there was evidence to support these allegations of mistreatment. In October 2021, police officers from Valeria's workplace invited her parents to the department. There, they were presented with a document to sign that would grant them an increased pension. The police portrayed Valeria as a hero who had died in a special operation, which had helped her parents gain more benefits. However, this was seen as a further insult to Valeria's family. The police seemed to want to stop any potential complaints from her parents, but this only angered them more. From that point on, the family no longer trusted any information about Valeria's death. Leonel was arrested on a warrant from the prosecutor's office and taken to a temporary detention center. The first trial took place in early November. The prosecutor presented a report and autopsy results that showed that Leonel was the shooter that morning. While trying to stop Valeria's bleeding, Lionel attempted to hide his pistol. Lionel's defense argued that Lionel did not see the shooter and believed he was also injured. She claimed that Lionel could not have fired the shot due to the position he was standing in and the trajectory of the bullet that hit Valeria. The prosecution argued that Lionel had planned to kill his co-worker Valeria, claiming it was intentional and not an accident. The judge deemed Lionel a threat to society and ordered him to be held for 6 months until his next hearing. Meanwhile, Valeria's family was satisfied with Lionel's detention, but had lost faith in the police. So Valeria's family chose to conduct their own investigation. Daniel and Michelangelo reviewed the case for new evidence and traveled to Santa Tomas to search for surveillance cameras that might reveal footage of the real shooter. At the same time, Lionel's lawyers also conducted their own investigation. On January 7, 2022, it was suggested that Felipe Ara was the most likely suspect in Valeria's death. That morning, Felipe was in a patrol car, and he opened fire while he was in the driver's seat. His pistol was identical to the one used by the police officers. In addition, Felipe washed his hands thoroughly before the gunpowder residue analysis and later gave inconsistent testimony. He initially claimed that he heard a gunshot and saw Valeria fall, saying that he came to her aid. He later changed his testimony, saying that he heard a gunshot and saw Lionel helping Valeria. During his reenactment of the event, Felipe claimed that Valeria had returned to the car to get her gun and keys to chase the criminals. Over the next few months, he continued to change his story, remaining vague on the details. The details the lawyer provided could undermine any investigative efforts by the prosecutor's office. Valeria's family expressed doubts about the competence of the police, and the idea that Felipe could have committed the crime began to seem plausible. Evidence gathered by Michelangelo and Daniel supported this theory. The judge soon considered the reports. However, Felipe Ara was listed as a witness in the case, although he had also been dismissed from the police, while Lionel remained the sole defendant. In July 2022, the court extended Lionel's detention. Shortly thereafter, in a second hearing, the defense continued to insist that Felipe Ara was the killer, while the prosecution focused on Lionel Contreras. Valeria's family and their lawyers launched their own investigation, leading prosecutors to request that the investigation be continued and new evidence be added to the case. Meanwhile, the prosecutor called Felipe Ara to testify. He claimed that he had not washed his hands before analyzing the gunpowder residue, and that Valeria's blood was on his fingers and sleeve when he assisted her. He also claimed that he had kept the gun with him since 2018 and had never exchanged the weapon with anyone. The trial is set to begin in March 2023, and prosecutors are asking for a minimum sentence of 15 years in prison for Lionel. Although Lionel is prohibited from speaking to the press, he violated this rule in May by inviting media representatives to his pretrial detention facility. He has publicly proclaimed his innocence, claiming that Felipe Ara shot Valeria in the back. A preliminary hearing was held on May 16, 2023, but did not result in any significant changes in the case. Lionel was cautioned for speaking to journalists. The next hearing was held on September 2nd. The prosecutor's office maintained its position. The prosecutor presented the following points. The patrol car driver prevented the criminals from escaping. At that time, 3 policemen got out of the car to persuade the criminals to surrender. Lionel used a weapon without a valid reason. The defense attorneys aimed to acquit Lionel based on a key argument. The prosecution lacked clear evidence proving that Lionel was the shooter. They claimed that the gun and gunpowder fell into his hands purely by accident when he was trying to assist Valeria. The court carefully considered the arguments from both sides and reached its decision on November 17. Lionel Contreras was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Valeria's relatives were disappointed with the outcome and believed the sentence was lenient compared to the crime he committed. While Lionel faces punishment, Valeria's family still has many unanswered questions, such as the motive behind the crime and why the prosecutor's office did not investigate these motives. One of the city's squares has been named in honor of Valeria Vivanco. Every year on the anniversary of her death, a memorial event is held where flowers are laid in her memory. The crime has highlighted widespread corruption in the police force, leading to the dismissal of 16 officers from the investigative agency. Valeria's family believes that she solved challenging cases that made her a burden to many, including those in the police department. She died tragically under mysterious circumstances, and the reasons behind her death may never be revealed. Even if her family uncovers new evidence, it is unlikely that the investigation will be reopened or that there will be a trial. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jenna Oakley. Jenna Oakley was born on March 2, 2001, in Indiana. She lived with her mother and two-year-old brother in a troubled home. Due to her mother's neglect and inability to provide a stable life, Jenna often found herself left alone from a young age. The situation worsened over time, leading to intervention from Child Protective Services in April 2016. As a result, Jenna and her brother were removed from their mother's care and relocated to live with Philip Oakley, who their father and his wife, Rhonda, who was 52 years old at the time. Rhonda welcomed the children into her home and accepted them as her own. Philip later revealed that Rhonda had been eager to be a good mother to her stepchildren from the start. She welcomed them into her home with open arms and worked to create a safe and comfortable environment for them. Jenna was a difficult child to manage. Despite her academic success, which earned her praise from her teachers, she struggled to follow the rules in her new home. Her behavior became an even greater concern when her parents discovered her relationship with a 20-year-old man named Kenneth, whom she had met at the age of 10 while living with her mother in Indiana. Kenneth was a mysterious figure who seemed to be both a supportive influence and a hindrance in Jenna's life. To better understand the events that unfolded, it's essential to delve into Rhonda's story and explore the complexities of her personality, as well as the significant impact she had on Jenna's life. Rhonda Oakley was born on March 5, 1964, in Casey County, Kentucky, to parents Howard Lee Raines and Mabel Walls Raines. She graduated from Casey County High School in 1982 and went on to work for 30 years in a prominent company that specialized in marketing, packaging, and printing services. Rhonda was a kind, loving, and cheerful person who was highly respected by her friends, who admired her warmth and kindness towards others. Rhonda met Philip Oakley on a golf course, and they fell deeply in love. They decided to get married and start a new life together. However, their relationship was not without its challenges. At the time, Rhonda was divorced and had 4 children from her previous marriage. Philip and Rhonda's family were initially against their relationship due to their significant age difference. They asked Philip to end the relationship, which led to frequent arguments within the family. For that reason, Philip believed the relationship of Kenneth and Jenna was unacceptable because Kenneth was 5 years older than his daughter, Jenna. Philip even threatened to involve the police if Kenneth continued to date Jenna. To maintain control of the situation, Philip and Rhonda took measures such as confiscating Jenna's phone and computer and enforcing strict rules. The situation at home became so unbearable for she that she finally confided in her father and stepmother, promising to end her relationship with Kenneth. However, she failed to keep this promise and continued to secretly meet with him. As a result, her relationship with her parents deteriorated, and she began to harbor a deep-seated hatred towards her parents. On September 1, 2016, at around 4 p.m., David, her younger brother, returned home from school and entered the house. As he walked into the kitchen, he was startled by the sound of 3 of their dogs barking frantically in the basement. Curious, David rushed downstairs to investigate and found his mother, Rhonda, lying motionless on the floor. Panicked, David immediately ran outside to seek help and eventually went to a neighbor's house to call the police. When the emergency services arrived, they were unable to revive Rhonda, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. The police found deep cuts on her neck, indicating a brutal attack. Initially, the police suspected a robbery, but upon further investigation, they discovered that nothing in the house had been stolen or disturbed. The investigation into Rhonda's death began, and her family and friends were left wondering who could have committed such a heinous crime. As the investigation progressed, several key pieces of evidence came to light. Rhonda's car was discovered to be missing, and a trash can in the kitchen was found to contain vomit. Furthermore, one of the large meat cleavers from the kitchen was found to be missing, leading investigators to suspect that it may have been the weapon used to attack Rhonda. When Philip returned home, he was questioned by detectives and informed them that his daughter, Jenna, had not attended school that day. In fact, Jenna had been unreachable since the incident, and her teachers had called Philip early in the morning to report her absence. This led the police to believe that Jenna may have been kidnapped by the same individuals who killed Rhonda, and that she may be in danger. During the questioning, detectives asked Philip if he knew of anyone who might have wanted to harm Rhonda or the family. Philip revealed that his daughter's boyfriend, Kenneth, had a troubled relationship with Jenna, and that it had deteriorated significantly. Philip admitted that he had threatened to contact the police if Kenneth did not stop seeing Jenna. Philip suspected that his daughter had been dishonest with him and that she and Kenneth had never intended to break up or follow the rules. It was possible that Kenneth had planned to get rid of the source of his problems and take Jenna with him. After learning this, the police focused their efforts on finding Kenneth. They discovered that on August 31st, the day before the incident, Kenneth had flown from Indiana to Lexington, Kentucky, at 3 a.m. From there, he took a taxi to Oakley's house. Another crucial piece of evidence came from a store manager in Denver, who claimed to have seen Jenna with a young man on September 1st. The manager handed over surveillance footage to the police, which showed Jenna and Kenneth entering the store and then leaving together to get into a car that looked like Rhonda's stolen vehicle. Notably, Jenna appeared calm and normal in the footage, not showing any signs of distress or being coerced. Her behavior led investigators to dismiss the possibility that she was being held against her will and raised suspicions that she might be involved in a crime against her stepmother. A search of Jenna's room later revealed a diary that confirmed these suspicions. The diary exposed a deep-seated hatred that her family seemed to be unaware of. Jenna wrote about her ongoing feelings for Kenneth, with whom she had maintained contact despite promising to stay away. Interspersed with these entries were expressions of resentment towards her family members, which grew increasingly disturbing over time. Jenna wrote in her diary that she intended to kill her father, stepmother, and brother to prevent them from ever separating her from Kenneth again, allowing her to be with him without interference. She outlined a specific plan and timeline to carry out these actions. When her father, Philip, read her words, he was overcome with shock and fainted. He struggled to comprehend that his daughter would not only conceive of such a heinous act, but also possessed the determination to make it a reality. Jenna had a plan to kill her family members. First, she intended to kill her father between 4 o'clock and 5 a.m. by luring him to the basement and stabbing him in the neck. Her next target was Rhonda, whom she planned to kill in her bedroom between 6 o'clock and 8 a.m. using the same knife. After that, she planned to kill her brother David in his room. The police discovered Jenna's diary at the start of their investigation, which became the primary evidence against her. Meanwhile, Philip gave the police Kenneth's phone number, allowing them to track and apprehend Kenneth and his girlfriend. On September 4th, 3 days after the crime, investigators located the fugitives in Tucumcari, New Mexico. The police informed local authorities about the case, who quickly located Rhonda's stolen car near a hotel where Kenneth and Jenna were staying. They were arrested and transported separately to a New Mexico detention center, awaiting extradition. However, a search of the car did not yield the weapon used in the attack on Rhonda. Kenneth chose not to face trial. He attempted to take his own life in his cell by hanging himself and wrote a letter. Officers found him and rushed him to the hospital, where he was in critical condition. In his letter, Kenneth claimed responsibility for the crime and stated that he and Jenna acted according to his plan, attempting to take the blame to absolve her. The authorities kept Kenneth's attempt on his own life and his confession from Jenna for a time, deciding it was best she didn't know while being transported to Kentucky. They wanted her to give her own testimony without being influenced by Kenneth's actions. Upon arriving in Kentucky, Jenna also confessed to the crime, providing the police with a detailed account of her actions. According to Jenna, on the day before the crime, Kenneth visited her at her house. They met early in the morning, which is why Jenna didn't attend school that day. They spent the entire day together. Rhonda arrived home around 3 p.m. and encountered Kenneth in the basement. This encounter sparked an argument between Rhonda and Jenna, which eventually turned violent. The violence escalated to the point where Jenna attempted to strangle Rhonda by grabbing her neck. Kenneth then intervened, taking over from Jenna. He grasped Rhonda's throat with such force that she soon lost consciousness and fell to the floor. Once Rhonda was unconscious, Jenna took a kitchen knife and inflicted fatal wounds on her neck, leading to her death. Witnessing the scene caused Kenneth to become ill, and he vomited into a trash can. When questioned by the police about the knife used in the crime, Jenna stated that she and Kenneth had disposed of it during their escape. They had wrapped the knife in a bag and thrown it away at a fast food restaurant. Jenna provided this testimony while Kenneth was still in serious condition at the hospital. He was charged with first-degree murder but was unable to stand trial due to his self-inflicted injuries. After 6 weeks on life support, he passed away. In October 2019, Jenna was formally charged with her stepmother's death. The charges alleged she either caused the death or collaborated with someone else. She also faced a theft charge. Jenna was held without bail at a juvenile detention center. Her father, Philip, stated he didn't care that she was his daughter and felt she didn't deserve his protection after the incident. He hoped Jenna would receive the punishment she deserved. Jenna wasn't informed of Kenneth's death until a court hearing, where she fainted upon learning the news. After regaining consciousness, she screamed, cried, and struggled to calm down. In January 2019, Jenna pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter and expressed regret for her actions in court the following month. She expressed remorse for the pain, anger, and disappointment she caused. Upon learning of the plea deal, Philip expressed disappointment, stating that the system failed to prevent the crime against his wife. He claimed there were warning signs that Jenna was in trouble, but no one took action. Philip added that people often advise going to the police immediately, which he and his wife did, yet they still found themselves in a terrible situation. At the sentencing hearing in March, Susan Hooper, a mitigation specialist for the defense, explained that the defendant suffered from abuse, violence, neglect, and lack of basic human rights throughout her life. The lawyer questioned what could have driven a 15-year-old with no history of violence to commit such a crime. The lawyer noted that Jenna had no prior record, was respected by teachers and peers, and it was unclear what led her to take such a desperate step. It was also noted that none of Jenna's family attended the hearing. Philip declined to participate, and Jenna's mother never appeared in court to learn her daughter's fate. This was unusual, as parents typically show interest in the case's progress, even in difficult cases where the accused has committed serious crimes. The lawyer, Susan, gathered extensive evidence and records showing that Jenna was abandoned by her mother, Christ, who neglected her well-being. Susan conducted an in-depth examination of Jenna's early life by reviewing child care and medical records in Indiana and Kent. She also interviewed various individuals who knew Jenna, including neighbors, family friends, caregivers, teachers, school counselors, and her older half-sister. The sister's testimony was particularly relevant, as she had lived with Jenna for several years. According to the sister, they never had a stable or safe home environment. After Christ's divorce from Philip, she started working at a local Indiana prison, where she became romantically involved with an inmate. She eventually posted bail for him, and he moved into their home. This marked the beginning of a nightmare for Jenna, who was only 3 years old at the time. The man consistently robbed them and brought other women into the house, all while Jenna and her brother were present. A neighbor contacted Child Services after discovering that Jenna's family home was infested with rats and that the young children were being left alone all day. When a social worker visited the home, she encountered a hostile mother who refused to let her inside. Upon eventually gaining entry, the social worker was met with a horrific scene. The house was filled with rotting food, piles of trash, rat droppings, and human waste. The kitchen was overrun with unwashed dishes, covered in mold and infested with rodents and insects, including a large number of cockroaches and fleas. The children were living in deplorable conditions, with no regard for their safety. They had unrestricted access to medications and other hazardous substances, further endangering their well-being. Despite efforts to improve their situation, relocating Jenna and her younger brother to live with their father in Kentucky did not alleviate their problems. Susan stated that Philip and Rhonda neglected them, forcing Jenna to sleep in an unclean basement. However, the lawyer countered that Jenna had simply moved from one unstable home to another. Prosecutor Richie Borms presented evidence during the hearing, demonstrating that Philip made every effort to provide for the children's needs and create a good home. Despite the defense attorney's claims, Borms argued that if abuse or neglect had occurred, child care services would have been notified by Jenna's neighbors, friends, or teachers. Furthermore, the prosecutor inquired if the defense attorney was aware of Jenna's relationship with Kenneth and the fact that her parents disapproved of they. The defense attorney stated that Kenneth was the only person who genuinely cared for the accused, Jenna. According to the defense, Jenna's past experiences had left her with unmet emotional needs. She was searching for someone to provide her with the love and care she had always lacked, and having lost that person, she was now devastated. Defense attorney Anthony Lee Taylor presented scientific documents to justify Jenna's behavior. The articles explained how the child abuse Jenna suffered at a young age had negatively impacted her psychological development. Anthony told the court that his conversations with Jenna led him to believe that she lacked parental love and that her strained relationship with her mother contributed to her inappropriate relationship with Kenneth. Jenna supported this statement by reading a letter in which she expressed her deep regret and apologized to her family for her actions. She acknowledged the pain she had caused Rhonda's family and friends and claimed that she had since become a completely different person, distinct from the Jenna who committed the crime. When Philip stepped up to the podium, the atmosphere in the hall became tense. He and his daughter were visibly anxious about the impending conversation. Philip approached Jenna, looked her straight in the eye, and asked what had driven her to commit such a serious offense. He reminded her that as her father, he had always treated her with respect, and that Rhonda had never spoken ill of her or caused her harm. Philip explained that when they took Jenna in, it was to give her a better life, and that Rhonda had cared for her like her own daughter. However, Philip acknowledged that Jenna had been a challenging teenager, and that he and Rhonda had discussed sending her to a specialized institution to help her get back on track. Philip also shared his concerns about Jenna's relationship with Kenneth, describing him as a predator who had taken advantage of his underage daughter. Philip revealed that when he discovered Jenna and Kenneth were still in contact despite being forbidden from doing so, he reported Kenneth to the police and warned him to stay away from Jenna, threatening legal action if necessary. Philip turned to his daughter, visibly shaken. He condemned her crime as unforgivable, citing Rhonda's exceptional character as a wonderful woman and mother, unmatched by anyone. He emphasized how Jenna's actions had devastated not only Rhonda but also others. Philip then questioned why Jenna planned to harm him and her brother, arguing that she was not a victim, but rather someone influenced by circumstance. Despite this, he concluded by reaffirming his love for her, saying that regardless of her actions, she would always be his daughter. Jenna, overwhelmed, burst into tears, shouting at her father that she never felt part of the family and had never experienced his love. Following this outburst, the judge called for a recess to deliberate the verdict. On March 27, 2019, the verdict was announced. Jenna Oakley was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with 10 years for first-degree murder and 5 years for car theft. She would be eligible for parole in 2034. This case served as a reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately prevails, and those who commit heinous crimes will face their due punishment. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Su Xingqi. Tam Xing Fai, a 43-years-old faculty member, was noticeably absent from work, sparking concern among his colleagues. On July 4th, a coworker named Ma tried to reach him on his mobile phone at 11 a.m., but there was no answer. Ma wasn't immediately worried, assuming Tam Xing Fai was busy taking care of his family's adopted dog, which had a skin disease and was scheduled to visit the vet. However, when Xing Fai failed to show up for a meeting at the university's finance department on July 5th, Ma's concern grew. He tried calling Xing Fai's mobile phone again, but there was still no answer. Unfortunately, Ma didn't have Xing Fai's landline phone number, so he couldn't try contacting him that way. By July 6th, Xing Fai had been absent from work for 2 days with no communication with his colleagues. One of his co-workers finally reported the situation to the finance department, which prompted Xing Fai's superiors to call his landline phone. Unfortunately, no one answered that call either. The police contacted the library where Helen Tong Yanyi, the 33-years-old wife of the missing man. Library staff reported that she was also absent from work without prior notice. They, originally from Zhongshan in Guangdong Province, China, had been married for 11 years and had 2 daughters, Hiu Man, 10, and Hiu Ing, 7 years old. Despite their difficult living conditions and financial struggles, the family was known to be kind, happy, and cheerful. They lived in an abandoned recycling station on Waju South Road, but Xing Fai often took his daughters on outings to have fun in town. Their children were well behaved, and the family seemed to be a happy one. Given their circumstances, it was possible that the family had decided to take a vacation together. However, something unexpected must have happened, preventing them from returning. Xing Fai's colleagues repeatedly tried to contact him by phone, hoping for a response. Eventually, someone answered, but to their surprise, it was a middle-aged man with an unfamiliar voice, not a member of the family. A man claiming to be Xing Fai's cousin called his workplace, stating that the family had taken a summer vacation to Guangdong Province in mainland China. He allegedly received Xing Fai's phone for safekeeping, but couldn't provide a return date for the family. However, the call only heightened suspicion among Xing Fai's co-workers. They found it out of character for Xing Fai to suddenly leave without notice, as he was a diligent and organized person. If he planned a vacation, he would have arranged it with his children's school in advance. Moreover, the The family was responsible for 9 stray dogs, raising concerns about who would care for them. Xing Fai's family situation also raised questions. His father, a sailor, had gone missing, and his mother was living in a nursing home due to illness. Xing Fai regularly visited her every week, making it unlikely that he would abandon her to go on vacation. Eventually, the police were called. One of Xing Fai's colleagues accompanied them to his home, an abandoned recycling station in Pingqi village. During the trip, a suspicious person was spotted. A short man was seen from a distance near the Xing Fai family's fence before quickly disappearing. Initially, no attention was paid to this, and they continued on. Upon arrival, they found the gate to Xing Fai's home locked. The police investigated the property and interviewed the neighbors. The abandoned recycling station covered a large area of approximately 450 square meters, but most of it was empty space, about 350 square meters of flower beds. The construction area was only about 90 square meters, and the building was constructed illegally. The original owner had built several tin houses on the site, using it as a waste recycling facility. A stone house on the opposite side was used as a pig farm, with very few people living in the area. As a result, the police only had one neighbor to question, an elderly woman named Wang who lived alone across the street. Wang claimed to have known the family's schedule and reported that they usually tended to their garden in the afternoon. Su Wang had limited knowledge of the family's personal lives, mainly due to their remote location. She was aware that the family didn't receive many visitors, and the only relative she knew of was Xing Fai's cousin, Su Xingqi. Wang didn't have information about Su Xingqi's address or that of Xing Fai's uncle, who supposedly lived in a nearby stone house. When the police questioned Xing Fai's colleague, they learned that a cousin had answered Xing Fai's phone, leading the police to believe it was Su Xingqi. However, Wang clarified that she didn't know Su Xingqi's address. She did report hearing cries for help from the house on July 5. In response, the police conducted door-to-door inquiries in Pingqi village and eventually tracked down a man matching Wang's description at a stone house on Waju Road. The man, 42 years old Zhu Shenqi, confirmed that he was Xing Fai's cousin and stated that he occasionally visited the family home to help with renovations and gardening. When questioned about the phone call, Su Xingqi maintained that the family had gone on vacation to China. On July 5, Xing Fai visited his mother at the nursing home and then returned home to inform Su Xingqi that he planned to travel to Danyuan, China for a few days. Due to the high roaming fees, Xing Fai asked Su Xingqi to hold on to his Hong Kong mobile phone until he returned. The person seen fleeing the scene by police and Xing Fai's colleague was actually Su Xingqi, who was leaving after feeding the family dogs. Su Xingqi's behavior and expressions were observed, and he appeared to be telling the truth. His story seemed consistent, and there were no obvious discrepancies. When asked if he had a key to the family home, Su Xingqi denied it. Despite finding Su Xingqi, the police continued their investigation, going door to door in the village. A local resident reported a stranger borrowed money from a villager, leading to a heated argument. The villager threatened to seek compensation from Xing Fai's family, who were struggling financially due to his mother's hospitalization and existing debts. The villagers initially believed the stranger was not Su Xingqi, but they suspected the family might be hiding to escape their debts. However, when the police inquired about Su Xingqi, the villagers revealed that he had been dishonest. They confirmed that Su Xingqi regularly visited the Xing Fai's home to perform maintenance and repairs, and he was always able to enter the house on his own, even when no one else was present. This information led the police to conclude that Su Xingqi must have had a key or access to the home Xing Fai's. In fact, he did have a key, which Xing Fai had given to him, as witnessed by Wang. When the police asked Su Xingqi for the key, he initially denied owning one. claiming he used a spare key for renovations that he had returned. However, his demeanor had changed, and he was avoiding key details. When the police threatened to search his home, Su Xingqi became agitated and suddenly remembered another house key that he had not returned. He retrieved the key from his dresser and handed it over to the police. Although Su Xingqi's behavior was suspicious, there was no direct evidence linking him to the family's disappearance. As a result, the police placed him under surveillance while continuing their investigation. During their investigation, police used a spare key to enter the home, where they found a scene of disarray and evidence of a ransacking. Fresh blood stains on the walls suggested that a violent incident had occurred on the property. The presence of a sink full of dirty dishes in the kitchen raised suspicions about the family's claim to have traveled to China, as it seemed unlikely they would have left their home in such a state before departing. A search of the master bedroom turned up the family's identification cards in a dresser, which prompted the lead investigator to contact the border crossing office. The office reported that the family had not left Hong Kong. Further investigation of the house uncovered a blood-stained shirt in a side room and a blood-stained plastic water pipe in the corner. Police then deployed sniffer dogs to search for additional evidence and potentially locate the missing family members. The dogs detected a scent and discovered blood stains under recently disturbed soil 9 meters away. Furthermore, despite it being summer vacation, their children, Hiu Man and Hiu Ain, were enrolled in summer school, indicating that the family would not have been on vacation. It became clear that the family had been victims of a crime, so a special team was set up to investigate. Due to the late hour, the police cordoned off the scene, restricted access to Pingqi village. Su Xingqi was confined to home. He was the prime suspect in the case. Su Xingqi promptly confessed. According to Su Xingqi's statement, he was from Huanpu in Guangdong province and typically resided with his sister, wife, and 2 sons, aged 15 and 16, who suffered from memory issues. Su Xingqi previously earned a living selling motorcycles in Junction City. However, following Guangdong's ban on motorcycles in 2006, sales plummeted. Financial struggles led him to reach out to his cousin, Xing Fai, in Hong Kong, seeking employment opportunities. Xing Fai helped Su Xingqi secure a construction job that provided a daily salary of 500 Hong Kong dollars, including accommodation and meals. After working for half a month, Su Xingqi became dissatisfied with his salary, which was reduced to 220 Hong Kong dollars due to company deductions. He impulsively quit his job and returned to China. However, in 2007, a typhoon damaged his home, and he needed money for repairs. Su Xingqi asked Xing Fai to help him find work in Hong Kong again. When Xing Fai couldn't find him a job, he proposed an alternative arrangement. Xing Fai would pay Su Xingqi from his own salary to help with household chores and repairs at his home. Su Xingqi accepted this offer and began traveling to Hong Kong every other month to work on Xing Fai's home and garden. Su Xingqi claims that he and Tong Yanyi, Xing Fai's wife, began a clandestine romantic relationship. However, Xing Fai discovered their relationship on July 3rd. On July 5th, Su Xingqi accompanied Xing Fai to a nursing home to visit his mother. Su Xingqi snuck out of the nursing home to return home and continue his affair with Yan Yi. Unexpectedly, Xing Fai returned home early and, in a fit of rage, physically confronted Su Xingqi. In a state of panic, the man grabbed a 25-centimeter-long fruit knife and stabbed Xing Fai until he fell to the ground, dead. Overwhelmed by what had just happened, he wanted to turn himself in to the police. However, Su Xingqi refused to let that happen. Since he couldn't change his mind, Su Xingqi decided to kill Xing Fai. Su Xingqi found some wires in the corner of the room, charged at him, knocked him to the ground, and tied his hands behind his back. Su Xingqi then covered Xing Fai mouth and nose with tape and put a plastic bag over his head. Before this, their two children were in their bedroom watching cartoons. They heard the commotion and their parents warning to run away, but instead, they ran towards their parents and saw their father dead and Su Xingqi in the process of killing their mother. The children ran back to their room, crying, and locked the door. Since the parent was already tied up, Su Xingqi left to pursue the children. Su Xingqi picked up a pair of pliers, opened the door, and used more wires to restrain the children. He tied their hands behind their backs, covered their mouths and noses with tape, and put plastic bags over their heads. The children, Hiu Ing and Hiu Man, also suffocated shortly after. After killing the whole family, Su Xingqi was at a loss of what to do next. He turned to his home to think it over. He thought that hiding them in a ditch or body of water would be too easy to find, and that dismembering them would be too exhausting and time-consuming. So he settled on burying them on their own property. On July 6th, he returned to the home to try and clean up as many blood stains as he could find. He then got to work on digging the hole. He dug a hole deep and wide enough to hold the family of 4 and quickly placed their bodies inside of it. He also disposed of the murder weapons in the pit before filling it back in. The police believed Su Xingqi's story, despite being skeptical about his motive, and took him to the location where he claimed the crime had taken place. He pointed out the spot where the sharp knife, water pipe, iron pliers, and other tools used in the crime were hidden. On July 7th, the police called in the fire department to assist in unearthing the remains. The firefighters arrived with excavation tools and gas masks, as the bodies were buried near a septic tank. However, they quickly encountered a problem when they hit a layer of cement while digging. It turned out that Su Xingqi had failed to mention in his confession that he had filled the pit with cement before covering it up. The firefighters were unable to break through the cement with their tools, and the police had to call in a private engineering company for assistance. The engineers arrived with high-grade tools and began drilling through the concrete slab. However, when they reached a point where they saw human hair, they became uneasy and refused to continue digging, not wanting to encounter a dead body. It took the police 13 hours to persuade them to resume the excavation. After excavating the pit, authorities found it to be 2.5 meters wide and 6 feet deep. The bodies of the 4 family members were discovered at the bottom, all barefoot and wearing only t-shirts and shorts. Xing Fai's body was at the very bottom. His hands and feet were bound with electric wire, and he had multiple stab wounds to his abdomen, back, and neck, with his clothes stained red with blood. The other family members were similarly bound with electric wire. Yanyi's mouth and nose were covered with tape, her hands and feet were bound, and her face was distorted. 2 family members, Hiu Man and Hiu Ing, showed no obvious signs of trauma, leading police to suspect they may have been buried alive. Su Xingqi was formally arrested and interrogated. During the interrogation, he altered his confession. He admitted that he lied about the affair. Shan Hui kicked Su Xingqi out of the house and banned him from returning. Despite this, Su Xingqi came back to apologize and was surprisingly forgiven by Xing Fai. Su Xingqi returned to the house on July 3rd to start working, and it seemed that his relationship with Xing Fai had been repaired. However, on July 4th, Su Xingqi attempted to molest a family member. Su Xingqi fled the house in a rage, not wanting to alert the neighbors. The next day, Su Xingqi tried to force his way into the house again, claiming he wanted to apologize. However, Xing Fai had anticipated this and returned home early. They got into an argument, which escalated into Su Xingqi stabbing Xing Fai. Su Xingqi's later confession matched his initial one, but with the additional detail of filling a makeshift grave with cement. However, after the bodies were taken away for autopsy, it was discovered that Su Xingqi's account of the events was inaccurate. The autopsy revealed that Xing Fai's murder was more brutal than initially described. Xing Fai had sustained 9 stab wounds to the head and neck, nearly 80 stab wounds to the body, and 10 stab wounds to the hands and feet. Contrary to Su Xingqi's claim, Xing Fai was strangled, not suffocated with a plastic bag. Hiu Ying's cause of death was the only accurate part of Su Xingqi's account. Forensic analysis of the home found at the cutlery and dishes did not have the family's DNA on them, but they did have Su Xingqi's DNA. This suggested that Xing Fai was not killed in the kitchen, but rather elsewhere in the house. The investigation also revealed that the murder was premeditated, as the cement used to bury the bodies had been purchased by Su Xingqi prior to the murder. Furthermore, the weapon used was not a kitchen knife from the family, but rather one belonging to Su Xingqi. Additional investigations by the police found that the family's bank cards had been used at an ATM after the time of death, but no money could be withdrawn due to repeated failed PIN number guesses. The cash and bank cards belonging to the family were also missing. Su Xingqi's motive for the crime was robbery, and it was premeditated. Whenever the police pointed out inconsistencies in his story, he would suddenly come up with a new explanation. According to Su Xingqi, his family's ancestral home in China needed urgent repairs, and his 2 children required 100,000 in cash to cover their school fees. He was not well liked in his local community, so he knew it would be difficult to borrow money from his neighbors. He turned to Xing Fai for help because his business trips to Hong Kong had not generated enough income. Su Xingqi suspected that Su Xingqi was wealthier than he seemed and that he is very stingy. The reason for his low salary during his time working for Xing Fai was that they were exploiting him for low-cost labor. On July 3rd, Su Xingqi traveled to Hong Kong without informing anyone and waited until July 5th, when they had a day off from work. When Xing Fai returned home and found Su Xingqi there, he asked if he needed to cook something, and they men went to the kitchen together. Su Xingqi asked to borrow 1 million Hong Kong dollars, but Xing Fai rejected the request. He explained that he had to use the money for his mother's medical treatment and his daughter's education. However, Su Xingqi didn't believe him and accused Xing Fai of only using him for cost labor. Xing Fai became angry and ordered Su Xingqi to leave. As Xing Fai turned his back, with a concealed knife on, Xingqi attacked him from behind, covering his mouth and stabbing him. Su Xingqi then restrained in Hiu Ying and Hiu Man and began searching the house for cash and bank cards. He demanded to know the password for the bank cards, and Xing Fai intentionally gave him a fake password. Su Xingqi didn't realize this at the time. Su Xingqi claimed that he had killed others by covering their mouths and noses with tape and putting a plastic bag over their head. However, when he went to the nearest ATM to withdraw cash, he discovered that the PIN number he had been given didn't work, and realized that Xing Fai had lied to him. Upon returning home, Su Xingqi discovered that everyone had suffocated to death in his absence. He found the food he and the others had been preparing and decided to eat it next to the 4 corpses while contemplating how to dispose of the bodies. After stealing $6,000 in Hong Kong dollars from Xing Fai's body, Su Xingqi buried the corpses and tools in a small pit, then went to sleep at Xing Fai home. The next morning, Su Xingqi realized that the smell from the bodies might lead to their discovery, so he bought cement and returned to the home. He dug up the pit, poured in the cement, and refilled the hole. Su Xingqi then stayed at the home to answer any calls to Xing Fai's cell phone or house phone, telling callers that he was taking care of things while the Xing Fai family is on vacation. However, Su Xingqi did not expect his ruse to be uncovered so quickly. Even later, he continued to lie about many details, including when he bought the cement and the cause of Yan Yi's death. At this stage, the police didn't think they needed to continue obtaining an accurate confession. In their opinion, they had collected enough evidence to proceed. The trial took place at the Hong Kong High Court on October 28, 2010. Su Xingqi initially pleaded not guilty and altered his previous statement. He claimed that his original story about the affair was true and that Xing Fai was killed in self-defense, while Hiu Man and Hiu Ying were killed accidentally. The defendant stated that he had falsely confessed to extortion and murder brutality, which included physical abuse and suffocation. On November 23, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict for the murders of Xing Fai and Yan Yi. However, the defendant was acquitted of murdering Hiu Ying. Despite this, the defendant received a life sentence for the 3 counts of murder and 1 count of manslaughter. The presiding judge criticized the defendant, describing him as lacking a conscience and being unrepentant. The judge also accused the defendant of fabricating the self-defense story and affair to tarnish the victims' reputations. After Xing Fai's family death, who lived in Hong Kong, surprisingly defended him. They accused Xing Fai of being a hypocrite and the real villain. According to them, Xing Fai was exploiting Su Xingqi for cheap labor and taking his money. However, the neighbors and residents of Ping Chi village were outraged by these claims, forcing Su Xingqi's family to move back to China to avoid the backlash. The crime was considered one of the most shocking in Hong Kong's history. The community showed an outpouring of support for the family Xing Fai's, with many visiting their home to offer condolences. Netizens also raised more than enough money to cover the funeral expenses. Additionally, the family's 9 stray dogs were adopted by another family. Every year on July 5, the adoptive family would take the dogs for a walk in Ping Chi village, near the home of their former owners. On August 9, 2022, 55 years old Su Xingqi passed away in Hong Kong's Stanley Prison due to liver cancer. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ali Kemp. Alexandra Ali Elizabeth Kemp was born October 11, 1982, in Leewood. She was the oldest of 3 children and the only daughter of her parents. After graduating high school with honors, Alexandra enrolled at Kansas State University. Following her freshman year, she returned to her hometown of Leewood for summer break. During her break, Alexandra took a part-time job at a local outdoor swimming pool near her parents' house, where her younger brother Tyler already worked. The pool was a quiet neighborhood spot, catering mainly to local residents, and it still operates today. On June 18, 2002, Alexandra reported to work on an overcast day because resulted in fewer visitors than usual. At 5 p.m., Tyler arrived at the pool to start his shift, but his sister Alexandra was nowhere to be found. Her phone and purse were still on the table where she usually sat, which made Tyler confused and worried. He immediately called his parents to report that Alexandra had vanished. Their father, Roger Kemp, rushed to the scene and began searching for his daughter. He first checked the pool, but it was empty. Next, he went to the small pump room near the pool, which contained equipment for water purification, a ladder, and other items. Upon entering the pump room, Roger didn't see anything out of the ordinary at first. However, he soon noticed a leg protruding from under a tarp. As he lifted the tarp, he was met with a horrific sight: his daughter Alexandra, brutally beaten and naked from the waist down, with multiple bruises on her face and body. Roger quickly called 911 and spoke with the operator. When the ambulance arrived, Roger was performing CPR on his daughter. The paramedics took Alexandra to the hospital, but despite their best efforts, she sadly did not survive. Alexandra was declared dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. An examination revealed that the cause of death was strangulation, despite the presence of multiple severe injuries. A thorough investigation found no evidence of forced intimacy, although her body was partially unclothed. The police collected DNA samples from Alexander's body and secured the pool area, searching for clues to identify the perpetrator. Evidence of a struggle was evident in the room where Roger discovered Alexander's body, including her flip-flops found in separate locations. Additionally, an open bottle of antiseptic gel and its cap were found at the scene. A few days later, while the police continued to investigate, Alexander's family and hundreds of mourners gathered to pay their respects at a funeral ceremony. Phil Howes, Alexandra's boyfriend since high school, was initially suspected in her death. As a pool administrator, he worked the morning shift on the day of her death, and Alexandra arrived at noon to start her 5-hour shift. Although Phil often stayed after work to spend time with Alexandra, he left promptly after his shift that day because they had plans for the evening. Despite being an early suspect, Phil had a solid alibi and was quickly cleared by the police. In an interview with detectives, Phil mentioned that Alexandra often felt uncomfortable being alone at work because some of the lawn maintenance workers would stare at her and try to flirt. The police investigated the lawn workers, but each of them had an alibi. However, the inquiry wasn't entirely fruitless. Several workers reported seeing a suspicious man with a video camera lurking in the bushes near the pool the day before Alexandra's death, apparently watching the female lifeguards in swimsuits. The police were given conflicting reports about Alexandra's final hours. Some people said she left the scene in an old Ford pickup truck, while others mentioned different circumstances. A study of Alexandra's mobile phone activity revealed that she had made plans with a friend, Laurel, to meet on the day she died. However, Alexandra didn't show up. When Laurel went to the police station to give her account of events, she explained that Alexandra had asked her to come to the pool to keep her company until her shift ended. According to Laurel, the pool was empty that day due to the poor weather, which made Alexandra anxious. When Laurel arrived at the pool at around 2:30 p.m., she didn't see Alexandra anywhere. Instead, a man she didn't know emerged from the pool house and waved at her with a smile. Laurel thought this man might be Alexandra's boss, and she decided to leave so as not to get her friend in trouble for socializing during work hours. At the time, she had no reason to think that anything was amiss. The police investigation led them away from Alexandra's workplace and to a completely different suspect. As a witness, Laurel provided a detailed description of the person she believed committed the crime. The police used this description to create a sketch of the suspect, who was identified as a white man around 30 years old, with a stocky build, short brown hair, and driving a 1980 Ford pickup truck. The suspect's identity was narrowed down when someone recognized the description as matching James Strader, a local mechanic who owned an old Ford pickup truck. James was questioned by the police and appeared to match the sketch, but he denied any involvement in Alexandra's death. His employer verified his alibi, stating that James was at work on the day of the murder. As a result, James was released from custody. While the police had eliminated James as a suspect, forensic analysis of evidence collected from the crime scene revealed male DNA on an antiseptic gel tube and on Alexandra's body. Unfortunately, the DNA did not match anyone in the police database, leaving the case still unsolved. Alexandra's family, friends, and boyfriend were ruled out as suspects after DNA tests showed no match with the DNA samples found on her body. The investigation was driven by Alexandra's father, Roger Kemp, who was determined to find his daughter's killer. After losing his child, Roger felt like he had lost his purpose in life. However, he found a new reason to keep going: justice for Alexandra. In an interview, Roger explained his approach: "You can either give up or keep fighting. I chose to fight." Impressed by his dedication, the police department gave Roger a workspace where he could collect and share information, and collaborate with the investigators. As they explored all available leads, Roger and the investigators contacted the popular TV show America's Most Wanted and asked them to feature Alexandra's case. The show's producers agreed, and her story was aired. The episode generated hundreds of calls from viewers with potential tips. Although the authorities thoroughly investigated each lead, none of them led to a breakthrough, and the case stalled once again. In February 2003, 8 months after Alexandra's death, a promising new lead emerged. Following a thorough investigation, police in Utah apprehended a suspect. 3 separate witnesses, including 2 women and a 14-year-old girl, came forward to report being forced into intimate encounters with a man. He had managed to evade capture initially, but was eventually tracked down and arrested in Utah. The arrested individual was identified as James Strader, the same person who had been questioned by Kansas police earlier. Notably, James bore a strong physical resemblance to the suspect's composite sketch. James was questioned by the police, but they failed to collect his DNA sample at the time. This might have been because his employer had convinced the police that James was at work on the day of the crime and had not left the premises. Despite this, James denied any involvement in Alexandra Kemp's death. Although he resembled the suspect in the composite sketch, James claimed he had not been near the pool on the day of the crime. He eventually provided a DNA sample for analysis. The results indicates that his DNA did not match the DNA found on Alexandra's body or the antiseptic gel tube. James was later imprisoned for unrelated charges, and the investigation into Alexandra Kemp's death hit a dead end once again. A year after Alexandra's death, the police still had no leads. Roger Kemp, Alexandra's father, and Phil House, her boyfriend, continued to fight for justice. Phil, who was also the president of the student community, sent the composite sketch of the suspect to students at other universities via email and asked them to watch an episode of America's Most Wanted that featured Alexandra Kemp's case. A year had passed, but the police and relatives' efforts had yielded no results in the Alexandra Kemp case. Undeterred, Roger Kemp, Alexandra's father, continued his quest for justice. He reached out to the America's Most Wanted program again, requesting a rerun of the episode about Alexandra's death. The show's creators asked if there were any new developments, and although Roger replied that there were none, his determination impressed them, leading to the episode being aired again. The rerun generated a fresh wave of calls to the police, prompting Roger to offer a $25,000 reward for any information that could help identify the person responsible for his daughter's death. The city of Leawood authorities increased the reward to $50,000. Roger also distributed flyers featuring his daughter's photo, a sketch of the suspect, and details about the reward. As Roger drove along the highway, he noticed billboards and realized they could be an effective way to raise awareness about the case. He began contacting advertising agencies to inquire about the cost of posting the information on a billboard. When he called the Lamar Advertising Company, the owner refused to take his money, offering to display the information on multiple billboards for free instead. Roger decided to publicize a sketch of the suspect and reward information on billboards along a major highway. The police received hundreds of tips, which took time to investigate. Notably, multiple tips mentioned the same individual, Teddy Hoover, who owned an old Ford pickup truck and worked in pool maintenance. His appearance matched the suspect's sketch, making it unlikely to be a coincidence. The police launched a search for Teddy Hoover and found his address in Kansas. When they arrived, Teddy answered the door, appearing surprised and nervous. However, this reaction didn't necessarily imply guilt, as many people become nervous when confronted by the police. When questioned about his whereabouts on June 18, 2002, Teddy claimed he couldn't remember, which was understandable given the year time lapse. Teddy denied any involvement in maintaining the pool where Alexandra worked. Nevertheless, the detectives asked him to provide a voluntary DNA sample to rule him out as a suspect. Teddy declined, stating he needed to consult with a lawyer first. He promised to contact the police after speaking with his attorney. The next day, Teddy's lawyer reached out to the investigators, expressing his client's concerns about his DNA sample being added to a database. Teddy reportedly believed in various conspiracy theories and feared that if he cooperated with the police, they would use the information against him in other cases. In an effort to alleviate his concerns, the investigators promised not to enter his DNA into any database and only use it to compare with the DNA found on Alexandra Kemp. The lawyer agreed to speak with his client and said he would call back. As they waited for the call, the police reviewed the case materials again and stumbled upon a piece of paper in one of the folders with a name that caught their attention. On the day of Alexandra's death, detectives began questioning onlookers who had gathered by the pool, trying to determine if anyone had seen anything suspicious. Interestingly, one of the people they spoke with was Teddy Hoover, who had claimed he had never been to the crime scene before. As the investigation continued, detectives grew increasingly confident that Teddy Hoover might be the man they had been searching for over the past 2 years. After several days, investigators contacted Teddy's lawyer to ask if his client was willing to provide a DNA sample. However, the lawyer responded by stating that his client had refused his services and broken off contact. Police immediately went to Teddy's house, but he had already escaped. As a result, the 29-year-old suspect was placed on the National Wanted list. Despite the efforts of the detectives, Teddy managed to evade capture for months. Billboards featuring his image were still up, but the search had yielded nothing. It wasn't until September 2004, when an anonymous caller contacted the police, that a new lead emerged. According to the caller, he knew the name of Teddy's girlfriend, with whom Teddy was living in Kansas. Detectives sought to locate Laura Barr, a woman connected to Teddy Hoover, but discovered she had left the state at the same time he escaped. This led them to investigate further. The U.S. Postal Service informed the Kansas State Police that Laura was receiving mail in Litchfield, Connecticut, along with a man named Benjamin Appleby, at the same address. The house where they resided was secluded and located in a rural area. Authorities suspected that Benjamin Appleby might be an alias for Teddy Hoover. To aid in the investigation, detectives from Leawood contacted the Connecticut State Police, requesting their assistance in locating Benjamin. It was discovered that he had a prior record in Connecticut, with an outstanding arrest warrant stemming from a 1997 incident where he had exposed himself to a schoolgirl. However, Benjamin had evaded capture and fled the state. With the existing warrant, detectives proceeded to the address associated with Benjamin's mail. Upon arrival, they found him at home and immediately took him into custody. As suspected, Benjamin Appleby was confirmed to be Teddy Hoover. It was revealed that while detectives in Kansas had been seeking a DNA sample from Teddy in connection with Alexandra Kemp's death, he had returned to Connecticut and resumed using his real name, attempting to maintain a low profile and escape notice. To apprehend Benjamin, detectives from Leawood traveled to Connecticut, anticipating that he would once again claim innocence. Before bringing him in for questioning, they devised a plan to unsettle him. They filled the interrogation room with crime scene photos and pictures of Alexandra, and placed folders with his name on the table, creating the illusion that the investigation had substantial evidence against him. When Benjamin entered the interrogation room, he was visibly shaken and unable to speak. A detective confronted him, inquiring about the implications of obtaining his DNA sample. Shortly after, Benjamin broke down in tears, confessing to Alexandra's death. He then recounted the events of the fateful June day, explaining that he had noticed Alexandra, found her attractive, and attempted to flirt with her. When she entered the pump room, he followed her, locked the door, and trapped her inside. When Benjamin touched she fought back, leaving him feeling humiliated. In a fit of anger, he attacked her, beating and strangling her until she lost consciousness. Benjamin then attempted to take advantage of her body, undressing her partially. He retrieved a tube of antiseptic gel from a first aid kit, intending to use it as a lubricant. However, just as he was about to proceed, the sound of a car horn distracted him. The victim's friend, who was waiting in a car behind a fence, had noticed something was amiss and sounded the horn. Fearing he would be caught, Benjamin hastily covered the body and fled the scene. Later, Benjamin returned to the area, where he encountered Alexandra's friend, whom he greeted with a smile and a wave, trying to appear nonchalant. He then got into his pickup truck and drove away. Hours later, Benjamin returned to the crime scene again, this time blending in with the crowd of onlookers gathered near the pool. The DNA evidence ultimately led to Benjamin's downfall. Tests revealed that the DNA found on the tube of antiseptic gel and on Alexandra's body matched Benjamin's. Thanks in large part to the efforts of investigator Roger Kemp, the police were finally able to identify the man responsible for Alexandra's murder, more than 2 years after the crime was committed. Benjamin Appleby claimed he initially wanted to plead guilty to avoid putting Alexandra's family through further emotional distress. However, at his first court hearing, he suddenly declared his innocence, stating that his confession was made under duress. Despite this, DNA analysis revealed that his DNA was the only sample found on the victim's body, making it difficult to dispute his involvement. Benjamin's lawyers attempted to argue that their client did not intentionally take Alexandra's life, admitting that he was responsible for her death but claiming it was not premeditated. However, forensic experts pointed out that Benjamin had strangled Alexandra for approximately 10 minutes, during which time he could have stopped but chose not to. The prosecution argued that Benjamin's sole intention was to observe Alexandra. On the day of the incident, June 18, 2002, the pool area was empty due to cloudy weather, allowing Benjamin to take advantage of the situation. He was found guilty by a jury in December 2005 and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 50 years, as well as an additional 19 years for attempting to force Alexandra into intimacy. In 2019, Benjamin appealed the decision, but the court upheld the life imprisonment sentence for first-degree murder. The Court of Appeal also ruled that the attempt to force Alexandra into intimacy was already taken into account during the initial sentencing. Benjamin was sentenced twice for the same crime, prompting the court to overturn the second conviction. However, even if Benjamin is released on parole, he will be 81 years old by that time. The authorities involved in the case credit Roger Kemp's persistence for helping them catch the culprit. While Benjamin was in prison, Roger and his wife established a self-defense program for girls, teaching thousands of girls and women across the country basic self-defense techniques. Roger Kemp's tireless efforts to bring attention to the case and his work in creating a safe community did not go unnoticed. He was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal by Barack Obama at the White House. Until his passing at 77 on March 1, 2022, Roger continued to work for the foundation he established in his daughter's name. His ultimate goal was to make a difference in at least one person's life. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Crystal Perry. Crystal Perry had been born on August 23, 1963, in Rumford, Maine, the youngest of 10 children. Her parents had faced significant difficulties providing for their large family, leading Crystal and her siblings to grow up independent. Crystal and her siblings had always wanted to build their own lives as soon as possible. They eventually moved to different cities and states in search of new opportunities. Crystal had met her future husband Tom in high school. Crystal and Tom married and initially moved to California, but Crystal soon discovered that life in the city was not right for her. After a year and a half, they decided to return to Maine, settling in the small town of Bridgeton, about an hour from Crystal's hometown of Rumford. Crystal found a job at a local shoe store, while Tom worked various odd jobs. Crystal and Tom's lives took a new turn when Crystal became pregnant and they welcomed daughter Sarah. Although Tom was initially excited to become a father, Sarah's arrival complicated Tom's relationship with Crystal. Tom began spending more and more time at a local bar, spending almost all of their limited income on alcohol. One time, he even took the money Crystal had saved to buy alcohol, leaving them with almost nothing. As Tom's drinking habits worsened, the family did not have enough money for basic needs, including food. Finally, Crystal decided to file for divorce. After the divorce, Tom occasionally saw Sarah, but he was largely absent from her life. The situation got worse when Tom got a new girlfriend and she started harassing Crystal. This girlfriend would call Crystal, make threats, come to her house, and cause provocations, all because she was upset with Crystal's past relationship with Tom. Crystal's fears for Sarah's safety grew and she became hesitant to let her daughter visit Tom, worried that Tom's new girlfriend might actually harm Sarah. Crystal moved in with her mother and worked hard to save enough money to buy her own house. After years of saving, she bought a small house near a peaceful lake on the outskirts of Bridgeton. Crystal was excited to provide a stable and loving environment for her daughter, Sarah. Crystal prioritized giving Sarah the attention and love she deserved. In their free time, Crystal and Sarah enjoyed spending quality time together, often watching movies or chatting with each other. One day was like any other day. Crystal went to work, and Sarah went to school. They had their usual dinner together, and Crystal carried Sarah to bed. However, a few hours later, Sarah's peaceful night was broken by a loud scream that startled her. At first, she thought Crystal was arguing on the phone, but it quickly became clear that there was something much more serious going on with Crystal. Crystal had been screaming loudly in the kitchen, causing Sarah to fear that her mother was being attacked. The bedroom door had been slightly open, but the kitchen was out of sight. Stiff with fear, Sarah could not move or make a sound. As she listened, she heard footsteps approaching, making her think that the next attacker would come for her. Feeling scared, she quickly hid behind the bed. However, the footsteps stopped, and Sarah heard the sound of a kitchen drawer opening, followed by the clatter of someone rummaging through utensils. Crystal's screams continued, filled with pleas for mercy, until she was stabbed. With each stab, Crystal's voice grew weaker. Sarah realized she could do nothing and would likely be killed as well. After her mother's screams stopped, she left the room and went into the kitchen, where she witnessed a terrible scene. Her mother lay in a large pool of blood covering the floor. Confused, Sarah asked her neighbors for help and eventually found an Italian restaurant whose owner lived in an adjacent building. They opened the door for Sarah and called 911 to report the incident. The officers immediately went to their home. Upon arrival, officers witnessed a gruesome scene. The kitchen was covered in blood, including the floors, walls, and kitchen appliances. Crystal had died, and medical experts determined that Crystal had lost too much blood. Police found a handprint on the front door glass, possibly Sarah's. No other fingerprints were found, but there were many bloody shoe prints on the kitchen floor. Investigators took photos to determine the shoe size and model, assuming they belonged to the killer. A trail of blood led to Sarah's bedroom but suddenly stopped as if the killer had changed his mind. One particular detail caught the detective's attention. The killer had tried to wipe away some blood on the floor. With the blood stains spreading, this effort seemed futile. Further investigation revealed that some of the drops of blood on the floor were irregularly shaped, suggesting they had fallen from the knife. This led investigators to believe that drops of blood might have flown out of the knife during the attack. Investigations showed that, in addition to the initial drops of blood, Other drops of blood on the floor appeared to have fallen at a 90-degree angle, suggesting they originated from a higher point. Detectives suspected these drops might belong to the perpetrator, who might have been injured during the crime. Further supporting this theory, the trail of blood drops led directly to a roll of tissue. This showed that the perpetrator used a tissue to stop the bleeding before hastily leaving the scene. Autopsy results showed that Crystal's body had suffered more than 50 stab wounds. The murder weapon, possibly a kitchen knife, was not found at the crime scene, suggesting the perpetrator might have brought it with him. An important detail revealed that the force used was so great that part of the knife broke and was stuck in Crystal's body. The investigation also found evidence of a previous sexual assault. As a result, medical experts were able to collect and analyze the perpetrator's semen along with the blood samples obtained, sending both for further laboratory testing. However, there was a problem. The local DNA laboratory was severely understaffed due to funding problems, leading to a significant backlog. As a result, detectives had to begin the investigation without forensic evidence, which would take at least 6 months to process. The investigation began by ruling out robbery as a motive because nothing was missing from the house. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry, so the police suspected that the victim had arbitrarily opened the door to let the perpetrator in. Since she was wearing pajamas, it was unlikely that she was expecting visitors. Detectives came up with 2 theories. Either the victim knew her killer, or someone she didn't know knocked on her door and convinced her to let them in under false pretenses. To pursue this lead, detectives turned their attention to the only witness, Sarah, who was undergoing a medical examination at the hospital. The police began questioning Sarah about the killer, and she explained that she had stayed in the bedroom until the incident was over. However, the police were a bit skeptical about her story. They asked her how she knew her mother had been attacked with a knife, and Sarah replied that it was obvious. Despite her reaction, detectives continued to pressure her, suspecting that she might have been withholding information and might have seen the perpetrator. During the first 3 days after the murder, police questioned Sarah 18 times in the hope that her story would change. However, she always maintained that everything happened as she initially described. Meanwhile, detectives pursued other leads and achieved their first breakthrough. They discovered a pair of boots at a local shoe store whose sole pattern resembled bloody footprints found at the crime scene. Additionally, they learned that Crystal had been harassed by Teresa, Crystal's ex-husband's girlfriend. Despite evidence that the killer was a man, the police decided to investigate Teresa, considering her history of threatening to kill Crystal. Maybe Teresa had found an accomplice to commit the crime. However, detectives found no evidence to support this theory. Further investigation revealed that Crystal was in a relationship with a man named Dennis at the time of her death. The two had met 2 years ago when Dennis started working at the shoe store. Dennis and Crystal began dating, and Dennis eventually proposed to her. Although Crystal accepted, they never married. Their relationship was tense, with frequent arguments and Dennis engaging in aggressive behavior, such as breaking objects and banging on walls. However, there was no evidence that he ever physically harmed Crystal. The day after Crystal's murder, detectives visited Dennis at his home. When they asked if he had left the house the night before or if he had seen Crystal, Dennis immediately asked if she was dead and then fainted. After regaining consciousness, he answered the detectives' questions. Dennis explained that he had planned to visit Crystal that evening but was delayed because he was helping a friend fix his car. When he later called Crystal, she said it was too late, leading to an argument and Dennis staying home. Police were able to verify Dennis' alibi, confirming that he had helped his friend that evening. Dennis also agreed to take a polygraph test, which showed no signs of deception, except when asked if he felt responsible for Crystal's death. He replied no, but the test detected his tremors. Additionally, detectives discovered that Dennis had the same shoe size as the killer, but no matching shoes were found in his house. Dennis agreed to provide a DNA sample but made a special request. Dennis had made a special request to the detectives. If they decided to arrest him, he had asked them to enter his workplace through the back door, instead of the main entrance. He had explained that he did not want to disrupt the work environment or make noise in front of his colleagues because his boss had always treated him kindly. However, because he had continued to claim innocence, this request had raised suspicions. The police investigation had led to another important discovery. They had contacted Crystal's best friend, who lived in another town, and she had revealed that Crystal had confided in her just weeks before the murder. Crystal had expressed her fear towards Dennis, saying their arguments had escalated and had become more and more heated. Dennis' behavior had also become more and more aggressive, causing Crystal to consider ending their relationship. However, she had hesitated to do so because she was afraid of his reaction. Detectives had also interviewed one of Crystal's co-workers, but she had not provided any useful information during their conversation. However, as soon as the police had left, Dennis had gone to the person's workplace and had begun asking about her conversation with the detectives. The police investigation had continued despite the lack of evidence against the initial suspect, as DNA test results would have taken several months to process. Meanwhile, they had pursued other leads. A strange tip had led them to a local man named Donnie, who had allegedly bragged about killing Crystal while drunk at a party. However, when questioned, Donnie had claimed to have no memory of the party and had denied any involvement in the murder. The police investigation into Crystal's murder had had difficulty finding any concrete clues. In an effort to uncover new information, Crystal's family had offered a $10,000 reward and had distributed flyers around town. However, Teresa, Crystal's ex-husband's girlfriend, had been seen repeatedly tearing up these flyers, raising suspicions. The ex-husband, Tom, had been thoroughly investigated but had eventually been ruled out as a suspect due to his severe alcoholism. His heavy daily drinking had made it unlikely he would commit a crime, and he had had no clear motive. Police had also investigated two other men Crystal had dated after her divorce but had found no evidence linking them to the crime. All three men, including Tom, had provided DNA samples to be sent to a laboratory for analysis. 9 months after the murder, the lab results had finally come in, but they hadn't matched any of the suspects, including Dennis. This had left detectives with no new leads. They had asked to take Dennis's DNA sample again for further testing, but the results had still been the same. The investigation into Crystal's murder had hit a dead end, causing detectives to reinvestigate their only witness, Sarah. They had suspected that Sarah might be hiding information or that a traumatic experience had caused her to repress memories of the killer. To question her further, police had gone to Texas, where Sarah was living with her aunt. A polygraph test had been administered to Sarah, but the results hadn't shown any deception. Despite this, investigators had continued to question her for days, asking the same questions over and over again. However, Sarah had always maintained that she had not seen the killer. The case had remained unsolved for several years. Police had continued to interview potential suspects and follow up on leads. But to no avail. The breakthrough had come in the late 1990s with the introduction of the FBI's DNA database. Investigators had uploaded the killer's DNA sample, but unfortunately, no matches had been found. The detective asked Sarah to work with a psychologist to try to recall any repressed memories of the crime. Even though Sarah agreed, the psychologist ultimately concluded that she really didn't remember anything and was telling the truth about not seeing the killer. The case remained unsolved for many years. Detectives continued to investigate but found no new leads. This changed in 2006 when a surprising development occurred. A DNA sample was entered into the FBI database and it matched blood and semen left at the crime scene where Crystal was killed. The DNA belonged to a man named Michael Hutchinson, who was never suspected in the case. Detectives discovered that in 2003, Hutchinson was arrested for assault and threatening with a weapon, resulting in a sentence of 6 months in prison and 3 years of probation. During his arrest, a DNA sample was collected, but it was not uploaded to the FBI database at the time. It was instead stored in a laboratory. 3 years after the initial DNA sample was taken, Michael was arrested for drunk driving with his children. He was released on bail but failed to appear in court, leading to jail time. Ironically, Michael was arrested on the day of the wedding and put in a prison cell. His DNA sample was retrieved and quickly uploaded to the database. The detective contacted Sarah, informing her of the development, but asked her to keep the information confidential until formal charges were filed. When asked if she knew the suspect, Sarah replied that she did not. Given that Michael was already in custody, the detective carefully built the case to prevent any possibility of him evading punishment. Further investigation revealed that at the time of the murder, Michael lived in Bridgeton, just 2 miles from Crystal's residence. When he was 19, Michael lived near the Italian restaurant where Sarah called the police. He regularly drove to his mother's house, which was just a short distance from Crystal's, meaning he often passed by her residence. The detective discovered that Michael could have easily encountered Crystal multiple times before the murder. When questioned in prison, Michael insisted he was not involved in Crystal's murder and denied knowing her, despite the presence of his semen and blood on her body at the crime scene. The detective found his denial unconvincing. During the visit to the prison, the detective observed the noticeable scar on Michael's palm. This was very significant because it was likely that Crystal's killer injured his hand during the crime. While this alone would not have been enough evidence in court, combined with DNA evidence, it contributed to Michael's eventual murder charge. According to the prosecution, Michael, an illegal drug user, saw Crystal as he passed her house on the night of the murder. He decided to assault her, leading to her death. While Michael refused to confess, the available evidence clearly showed that he was responsible for the assault and murder of Crystal. During the trial, an explanation was found for the murderer's lack of fingerprints at the crime scene. It turned out that Michael's job as a bricklayer was the reason. Over time, the constant wear and tear on his hands had erased the patterns on his palms, making it impossible for him to leave fingerprints. Michael presented testimony about his timeline to defend himself. He claimed he had met Crystal at a bar and they had returned to her place to have consensual sex. However, his story became suspicious when he described a strange man wearing a black motorcycle jacket breaking into the house, knocking him unconscious, and killing Crystal. When Michael regained consciousness, he allegedly tried to fight off the attacker but had injured his hand. The attacker then fled, and Michael also left the crime scene without a reasonable explanation. Michael's story was very unconvincing. The investigation revealed that the only shoe prints at the scene had belonged to Michael. If his story was true, the intruder would have had to take off his shoes before entering the house, which still wouldn't have explained the lack of other marks on the floor. Furthermore, no witnesses had come forward to confirm that Crystal had been at the bar with Michael. The trial ended on April 9, 2007, with Michael being unanimously found guilty. As a result, he received a life sentence without the possibility of parole and remained incarcerated. Sarah's life was deeply affected by her mother's death, but she found the strength to move forward with time. She pursued further education, became a writer, and wrote a book about her mother's murder. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alison Bonilla. Alison Pamela Bonilla Vasquez was born on November 7, 2001, in Cartago, Costa Rica. She is an only child, living with her mother Yendrai Vasquez. In addition to her mother, her grandparents Ramon and Marjorie, and her aunt Samara also helped raise Allison. Allison's father left the family shortly after her birth. He chose to be with another woman who was pregnant. He did not want to play a role in Allison's life. Only once, when he was diagnosed with lung cancer, did he ask to see his daughter, and Yendrai allowed him to. It is worth noting that his second family did not know about Allison's existence. Allison and her mother, Yendrai, had a particularly close relationship. For Allison, Yendrai was not only a mother but also a father. Therefore, Allison often gave her mother gifts on Father's Day. Their relationship went beyond the typical mother-daughter relationship. Allison felt comfortable sharing everything with Yendrai without fear of being misunderstood or judged. Despite not having a father, Allison did not feel lonely or abandoned. She had a large family and enjoyed spending time with them. She also attended church regularly every Sunday. Relatives described Allison as a kind, outgoing, and friendly girl. In photos, she always looked happy, and there was no sign of sadness or longing in her eyes. Allison had always dreamed of becoming a model. She decided to drop out of 8th grade to focus on makeup classes, thinking that combining the two was too difficult. She did not want to waste time on something that would not help her achieve her goals. After that, Allison started looking for a job to help her mother pay the bills but did not receive any responses from the places she applied. This made her very sad. Her mother, Yendrai, realized that her daughter would have difficulty finding a job due to her limited education, so she encouraged Allison to take evening classes. At age 18, Allison enrolled in Liceo Enrique Geyer, a few miles from home. During this time, she completed a pastry course and began practicing. Allison made delicious cakes and desserts that were loved by everyone in the neighborhood. This helped her find a way to make money from her baking talent. Allison had a boyfriend named Harold Sura Solano who lived in Cachi, a district in the province of Cartago, Costa Rica. Usually, Allison stayed home with her mother in the morning, then met Harold, and then went to evening school at 6 o'clock. She often returned home late by bus. The route from the bus stop to her house was dangerous, dark, and deserted. Therefore, Allison always informed her mother of her location, and sometimes her mother picked her up at the bus stop or halfway. On March 4, 2020, Allison went to her mother's nail salon, then visited her classmate Pal for about 15 minutes. They arrived at school at 6 p.m. and separated because they had different classes. Allison arrived at school and waited in an empty classroom for about 15 minutes before realizing that her classes had been canceled for the day. Instead of going home right away, she decided to visit her aunt who lived near the school. However, her aunt was not home. Allison then decided to go to her boyfriend Harold's house. When she arrived, she learned that Harold was at work but would be back soon. Harold's mother invited Allison inside to wait. When Harold returned, the family had dinner together, talking about a variety of topics and discussing future plans. After dinner, Harold excused himself for a moment, saying that he had urgent business to attend to but would be back soon. At 8:15 p.m., Allison left Harold's house without waiting for him to return. This set off a chain of events that would become nationally known. Harold returned home about 5 minutes later and, seeing that Allison had left, texted her to ask where she was and offered to give her a ride home on his bike. Allison replied immediately that she had already arrived at the bus stop. While waiting for the bus, she texted her friend Pa to ask if Pa's cousin could give her a ride home on his bike. However, Pa's cousin refused because his bike was a special type and not suitable for two people. It is unclear why Allison did not ask her boyfriend for help. She may have been angry with him or did not want to bother him. Allison got off the bus at 8:43 p.m. Her house was about a mile away. Feeling anxious and scared, she texted her mother to pick her up. At 8:45 p.m., Allison texted her boyfriend and mother that two suspicious men had gotten out of a car and were following her. She decided to run home to avoid them. The road Allison was on was dangerous, poorly lit, and had few people. There was only one security camera there, which captured a blurry image that could have been Allison. Allison's mother, Yendrai, went to the bridge half a mile from their home to pick up her daughter but did not see her. She tried to stay calm, thinking that Allison might have gone back to the bus stop for safety. However, she did not find her there either. She finally thought that Allison had not seen her and had gone home on her own. When Yendrai returned home, she found that Allison was not there. She immediately called relatives and friends to ask for help in the search. About 30 minutes later, Harold woke up and received a call from his Aunt Samara saying Allison was missing. He tried to contact Yendrai but was unsuccessful. 3 hours later, Yendrai reported Allison missing to the police, and the search began. Luckily, Yendrai had the last photo of Allison in the clothes she was wearing. Police checked several locations, from the bus stop to Allison's house, Katchi Lake, and the nearby hydroelectric dam. On March 5, 2020, police found their first clue, Allison's glasses in the grass about a mile from her house. However, Allison seemed to have disappeared without a trace. 8 days later, they discovered Allison's identification on a coffee plantation. This was surprising because they had checked the area several times before. What was even more suspicious was that her ID was placed in such a conspicuous and clean location. As if someone had intentionally placed it there to mislead the investigation or hide something. 15 days after Allison went missing, Yendrai received a call from Allison's father. Instead of showing concern or offering help, he said that Allison was missing because she was too beautiful. Shocked by these insensitive words, Yendrai immediately hung up the phone, unable to believe what she had just heard. For a long time, the family, police, and volunteers continued to search for Allison. Every Sunday, they hung up posters with her picture. One day, they decided to paint messages on the streets, recreating Allison's journey from the intersection to the bridge, where she was believed to have disappeared. They also put up posters on roadside poles to attract the attention of passers-by. At the same time, the police received an important clue. A man came to the police station and said that he knew Allison and had seen her on the night she disappeared. According to the man, at around 8:30 p.m. On March 4th, he left his home on his motorbike to pick someone up. On the way, he saw Allison and a burgundy two-door BMW parked next to her. He turned around to check on the situation and realized it was his cousin's BMW. He was 100% sure of this because the car had distinctive bright yellow headlights. Another witness also confirmed to the police that he had seen the same BMW near where Allison went missing that evening. The car belonged to Nelson Sanchez Urania, 28, nicknamed Sukia. Locals called him that because they believed he was a member of a gang in the area. In fact, Nelson and Allison knew each other. Their families had been acquainted for a long time and had lived in the same neighborhood for a while. However, according to Allison's mother, they had only interacted with Nelson a few times. It was just a normal neighborly relationship, not a close friendship. One day, Nelson offered to give Allison and her cousins a ride home. She agreed because it was morning, she was not alone. And she thought Nelson was a good person. On March 2, 2020, 2 days before Allison went missing, Nelson contacted her via Facebook. He sent a message asking Allison to answer some questions. On her cousin's advice, Allison agreed to answer them. Next, Nelson asked Allison about her feelings for him. Specifically, he wanted to know if Allison liked him. Allison was confused by Nelson's sudden question, as they were not close and barely knew each other. When Allison asked why, Nelson explained that he did not have a negative opinion of her but wanted to know if she thought badly of him. Allison reassured Nelson that she did not hate him and that everything was normal between them. Nelson thanked her and said goodbye. Police searched Nelson's home and seized his car, cell phone, and computer. Investigators found shocking images of women being abused on his phone. When they inspected the car, they found that it had been thoroughly cleaned with car polish. However, the front driver's seat carpet and trunk carpet had been removed. Police found hair and blood on the trunk lid and sent samples to a lab for analysis. After examining the exterior of the car, police used a police dog to search for traces. The dog detected possible blood on the two front seats and in the trunk. To confirm, the police used a luminol test, a chemical that reacts with hemoglobin in the blood. The results showed that there were many blood stains on the car's interior, despite the owner's efforts to remove them with cleaning products. While waiting for the results from the lab, Nelson remained free but was closely monitored by the police. They monitored his every move to prevent him from leaving the city or the country. Although Yendrai repeatedly requested his arrest, the police did not have enough evidence to do so. Therefore, Nelson continued to live freely without being prosecuted for many months. Yendrai believed that Allison had been kidnapped for ransom. She tried to stay calm and hoped that her daughter was still alive. In preparation for Allison's return, Yendrai kept her daughter's room as it was, not cleaning or rearranging the furniture. She even bought Allison a gift. Yendrai told the press, "I will continue to do so. As long as there is no evidence that she is dead, I still believe that my daughter is alive and will return home." Laboratory test results confirmed that the hair and blood found in Nelson's car belonged to Allison. The police immediately arrested Nelson. Later, his ex-girlfriend told the police that Nelson had never physically abused her but had put a lot of mental pressure on their relationship. Specifically, he forbade her from contacting her friends and using the internet. According to her, Nelson only wanted to have a sexual relationship with her. His previous boss revealed that he was very irresponsible at work and even stole about $11,000. Additionally, his landlord said an ex-girlfriend had broken up with him because she was tired of paying his debts. She described him as a very spoiled man. After that, Nelson confessed to his crimes against Allison. He said that on the night of Allison's disappearance, he found her walking alone on a deserted road. Taking advantage of the late hour and their acquaintance, Nelson offered to give Allison a ride. She agreed and got into the car without suspicion. However, instead of taking her home, Nelson drove to a remote coffee plantation and forced Allison out of the car. Nelson violently attacked her, knocking off her glasses and leaving her nearly unconscious. He dragged her to a nearby abandoned house, where he raped and brutally beat her. Nelson then tied her hands with cloth and duct tape to the front seat of his car. Finally, he stuffed her into the trunk of the car and drove to a dumpster in San Gerano Cachi. There, the killer pushed Allison off a cliff into a pile of trash below. He justified his heinous actions by saying that he was under the influence of drugs. He also admitted that he had long been obsessed with Allison, and when he saw her that night, he decided it was his chance to carry out his dark intentions. Surprisingly, Nelson later recanted his initial statement, accusing the police of coercing him into confessing. However, the authorities had enough evidence to charge him despite his denials. The suspect could face a maximum sentence of 35 years in prison. In the early morning of September 4th, a search party went to the San Ano landfill to look for Allison's body. However, because the area was large and difficult to access, finding Allison's remains was an extremely difficult task. Moreover, it had been 6 months since Allison went missing. Just 25 days after Allison confessed, the police discovered a number of important pieces of evidence. They found human bone fragments, including a spine, ribs, part of the pelvis, and a femur. They also found pieces of clothing that Allison was wearing on the day she disappeared, along with a pair of sneakers with studs inside. All of these clues were sent for testing and thorough analysis by the police. Jose Francisco Herrera, the suspect's defense attorney, questioned the authenticity of the evidence because it was found by volunteers, not professional police. He also said that the discovery of the remains coincided with the time his client declared his innocence, which was suspicious. Rodrigo Era, the attorney representing Allison's family, on the other hand, criticized the suspect's change of testimony, saying that it undermined the credibility of the official investigation. On October 5, 2020, experts confirmed that the remains found belonged to Allison. Because only a partial body was found, they were unable to determine the exact cause of death. However, examination of the remains revealed multiple fractures that appeared after death, suggesting she may have fallen from a great height. Her clothes were torn and her sneakers had bite marks, suggesting a possible animal attack. This would explain why the remains were found scattered in different areas of the landfill. Allison's mother, Yendrai, is furious with the police for not listening and acting promptly. She believes that if they had arrested Nelson sooner, he would have confessed and Allison's body would have been found in better condition. This is an irreparable loss for the family. Despite the terrible pain she is enduring, Yendrai finds some solace in saying, "My daughter is in a better place now, where no one can hurt her anymore." The trial of Nelson took place on July 19, 2021. Harold, Allison's boyfriend, was a key witness in the case. According to Harold's testimony, on the afternoon of March 4, 2020, at approximately 6:30 p.m., he returned home and found Allison there with her mother. Harold then left for approximately 5 to 10 minutes. When he returned, he discovered that Allison had left without saying anything. While Allison was on her way home, Harold texted her repeatedly. As soon as she got off the bus, Allison texted Harold to say that two men were following her. Concerned for her safety, Harold suggested that she take a taxi and promised to pay for it. However, Allison refused twice and said that she would run home. Harold did not receive any further response from Allison after that text message. According to his explanation, he only informed his mother of the situation. He did not contact Allison's mother, Yendrai, because his phone battery died. He then fell asleep for about 30 minutes. It was Allison's aunt who called him to inform him that his girlfriend was missing. Since then, he said he has been worried and tried to call Allison several times, but all the calls went to voicemail. He also could not be reached via WhatsApp messages. Harold said he joined the search party for a few days but then had to stop because he felt unwell and had to go to work. He really wished things had gone differently. If he could go back in time, he would have taken Allison home that night. However, unfortunately, what happened cannot be changed. On August 18, 2021, the court sentenced Nelson to 18 years in prison for taking the life of Allison. He could have received twice the sentence, but the judge pointed out that there was no evidence to confirm that Nelson knew the route and time Allison would return home and that he planned to attack her. Furthermore, due to the condition of Allison's remains, there was no evidence that Nelson forced her to have sex. The story does not end there. Allison's family was not satisfied with the original sentence, arguing that it was not commensurate with the crime. In 2022, they successfully appealed, and the court decided to retry the case. As a result, on September 28, 2023, Nelson was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Allison's family's lawyer emphasized that Nelson acted in a cruel and inhumane manner and took advantage of the trust of the victim and her relatives. The court ruled that Nelson's actions were intentional. Nelson used his long-standing relationship with Allison to commit the crime. The criminal court also took into account Nelson's lack of remorse for his actions. Although still hurt and angry, the victim's family was relieved by the new verdict. The decision ended a painful chapter in their lives that lasted more than 3 years and put an end to this nightmare. Allison's family created a memorial at the spot where her body was found. They placed a cross, flowers, and a small altar with a photo of Allison and a statue of the Virgin Mary. Allison's case has caused a stir in Costa Rican media and social media. It has also led to many marches in memory of Allison and other women who have been victims of similar violence. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lynette Vonda Pontius. Lynette Pontius was born in Battle Creek, Michigan, USA. She was the youngest child in her family, with 2 brothers who were 2 and 3 years older than her. Lynette is very active, sociable and cheerful, so she is always popular in every group of friends. She very also attractive and caught the attention of the opposite sex. She never lacked boyfriends and led a somewhat carefree lifestyle. As a result, Lynette became pregnant and had to leave school in the 9th grade. When Lynette turned 16, she gave birth to her first child. She lived with the child's father for a while, but they eventually broke up. He showed no interest in Lynette or the baby. He disappeared and ignored all to contact him. Lynette's situation was difficult. She struggled to find a suitable job so that she could conveniently take care of her newborn child, and no one wanted to hire Lynette, a teenage mother. Eventually, Lynette found work at a fast food restaurant. To make ends meet, she continued to build relationships. She was interested in several guys in her social circle until she met Martin, a customer at the restaurant, who was 2 years older than her. Martin was from the same city as Lynette's. After high school, he took a part-time job at a private company owned by a married couple who made fences. He wasn't interested in pursuing higher education, so he spent his free time with friends. In 1999, Martin and Lynette started dating after being introduced by a mutual friend. Despite being somewhat bold, Martin was overall a likable person and always keeps a positive attitude. Lynette's relatives believe that he will be able to guide her in the right direction. However, there were rumors that Martin struggled with an addiction to mild substances. Martin and Lynette dated for less than a year, but during that time, he became part of Lynette's family. Her parents welcomed him with open arms, and he came and went from their home freely. However, love that blooms quickly also fades easily. Later, Martin admitted that Lynette was manipulative and accepted no disagreement from others. They had regular conflicts, which led to their breakup. It seemed like nothing special had happened, just 2 young people who didn't get along. But a few weeks after the breakup, everything changed when Lynette called Martin and told him she was pregnant. Initially, Martin doubted that the child was his, but Lynette insisted it was. A greater surprise came when Lynette was arrested for identity theft, cashing other people's checks, and several other minor scams. Her explanation was that she had committed these crimes out of desperation, as she had no other means of supporting her children. Despite her, Lynette faced the possibility of prison. To protect their first child from ending up in an orphanage, Martin chose to become the boy's legal guardian. He felt responsible for this child and wanted to provide as much support as possible. Martin was a thoughtful father who put his children's needs first. After Lynette's release from prison in 2005, he and Lynette came to a mutual agreement. Martin allowed the children to maintain contact with their mother, and during her imprisonment, he frequently took them to visit her for several hours. Martin made sure the kids had regular, extended visits with Lynette during her imprisonment. Martin has proven himself to be a thoughtful father. He took the children hiking and spent all his free time with them. Even after Lynette's release, life continued smoothly for the family. Martin and Lynette, who were once a couple, agreed on custody arrangements that allowed Lynette to have regular visits with their child. Lynette took custody of their older child. Meanwhile, she started dating a new man and soon became pregnant with her third child. She then officially published her relationship with the father of her unborn child. During this time, Martin had to leave Battle Creek and move to Kalamazoo. In Kalamazoo, he began a relationship with a new girl, Elizabeth, who also had a child. Martin and Lynette grew apart, but they remained connected through their daughter. At first, everything in the family seemed fine. However, Lynette became concerned as the distance between her and her daughter grew. Matters became more complicated in February 2007, when Martin Campbell was attacked at his girlfriend Elizabeth's house. During the attack, he was shot once in the leg and once in the shoulder. As Martin attempted to flee, he collapsed from the pain and shock. The attacker then pointed the gun at Martin's head and pulled the trigger twice. The attacker intended to empty the entire magazine into Martin. However, after 2 shots to the head, the weapon jammed. Determined to kill Martin, the criminal furiously began to hit his on the head with the pistol. He then left the bleeding Martin on the floor and calmly walked away. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation and spoke with a witness. Elizabeth provided the first clues about the criminal. Although he wore a mask, she noticed that he appeared much older, as she saw a mustache with gray hairs peeking through. The killer's behavior was clear. He didn't steal anything or attack Elizabeth. His target was Martin. This was evident from the brutality of the attack, which left no chance for Martin's survival. At that time, doctors were trying to save Martin's life. Despite suffering severe head and face injuries, he survived, which was nothing short of a miracle. He was fortunate because the gun jammed. Even a shot to the head could have been fatal. The first bullet hit his shoulder and narrowly missed a major artery. Had it been severed, Martin would have bled to death before the ambulance arrived. Martin's miraculous survival was also crucial for the investigation, as it allowed detectives to get information directly from him. Once his condition stabilized, detectives visited him in the hospital to talk. Martin and Elizabeth were certain that the attempted murder was not a random. This was the second attempt on his life that he had survived. In late February, just days before the shooting, Elizabeth reported an attempted murder while she was returning from the store. As she drove into the garage, a stranger crashed into her car's trunk, blocking her vehicle and the garage door, preventing it from closing. She got out and saw a black SUV, from which a weapon man emerged. The man pointed a gun at Elizabeth's head and asked where Martin was. However, she remained calm and told him that Martin was not home. This was a lie, as she knew Martin was playing with the children in the backyard. She lied to protect their lives. Her tactic worked. The man believed her and left. Before leaving, he mentioned that Martin owed him a large sum of money, and he was there to collect the debt, warning that he would not leave them alone. At that time, Elizabeth contacted the police and provided a detailed description of the man and his car. Additionally, a neighbor witnessed the skirmish, sensed something was wrong, and noted the car's license plate. However, the police discovered that the car was reported stolen and registered in another state, which did not help the investigation. It seemed the search for the criminal had reached a dead end. Nevertheless, a similar car was found a few blocks from the attack site in an apartment complex parking lot. The police attempted to track down the driver of the black SUV but were unsuccessful. The day before the unexpected attack, a masked man broke into Martin and Elizabeth's house and shot Martin at close range. Martin was certain that the killer had been sent by his ex, Lynette Pontius. She was the only person with a motive against he. Her criminal record raised suspicions, as she had previously spent 2 years in prison for financial crimes, including fraud and extortion. However, initially after her release, there were no issues, and Martin did not restrict her communication with their child. Lynette quickly begins to control things, and she wants more. She sought to control the process of raising her children and would behave brutal when she was dissatisfied with something. This led to constant conflicts. As a result, Martin decided to reduce the time his daughter spent with her biological mother, Lynette, which further angered she. Finally, she went to court to dispute Martin's custody. However, she faced an obstacle due to her previous convictions, which worked against her, giving Martin a strong chance of winning. This could have been the last straw, making her hate him more and more. Investigators had several questions, particularly about why Lynette had resorted to such actions. Until now, no one had ever observed any aggressive behavior in Lynette. All her relatives and friends knew her as a kind and cheerful person. Additionally, it was clear that the attacker was an older man on both occasions, suggesting that Lynette might truly be innocent. To find answers, the detectives decided to directly contact the main suspect in organizing the assassination attempt. They were surprised to discover that Lynette had left her hometown the day after the shooting at the house Martin. Elizabeth found it suspicious to exclude Lynette from the suspect list. However, finding and detaining Lynette was not easy. It was discovered that she was trying to flee the country, and a nationwide search was launched to capture her. During this time, detectives received another lead. It was revealed that Martin may owe large sums of money from criminal organizations. Some of Martin's friends mentioned that he had been in debt for a long time. Martin used to consume soft substances and smoke. He admitted this to the police but insisted that those days were behind him. Martin claimed that he only used these substances during his meet with Lynette and had quit his bad habits long ago. Before Lynette was caught, a prisoner from the local jail informed the police that Lynette had approached him some time before the attack, offering money to carry out an attack Martin. Lynette was searching for a mercenary to kill Martin. She devised a cunning plan. Accordingly, the killer must win Martin's trust, and after a while, get him drunk or full of mild narcotics to ensure unconsciousness. Afterward, the hired killer would eliminate Martin. Lynette believed it would be best to make it look like an accident. Overall, she didn't care about the method, as long as Martin dies, so that she can gain custody of their daughter. Later, the police gathered evidence from various individuals who reported receiving similar requests and provocations from Lynette. Many people claimed that she had tried to hire them as mercenaries, but none of them were actual shooters, and they all declined the offer. Fortunately, the police quickly identified the killer, who was likely the person who agreed to help Lynette. This suspect was a 59-year-old man named Joseph Lover, who was romantically involved with Lynette. He had a history of involvement in numerous serious crimes. Joseph fit the description of the attacker and was capable of carrying out such a bold attack in broad daylight. The brutal massacre aligned with the style of Joseph, a man who had spent most of his life in prison. However, when the police attempted to locate him, they discovered that he had left the city around the same time Lynette disappeared. It is likely that they fled together. Lynette and Joseph managed to stay hidden until February 13, 2007, when they were discovered near the Mexico-US border. They had been planning to escape to another country to avoid facing justice. However, Lynette realized she needed to retrieve some important documents she had left behind in Mexico and had to return for them. Unfortunately for them, the police were already there waiting to capture them. 5 days later, they were taken into custody, which was a great relief for Martin, who was worried about another attack. Although he was pleased with the arrest, the investigation struggled to communicate with the criminals. Surprisingly, Joseph was very cooperative with the detectives. He admitted he was driving a stolen car and having a pistol, hoping for a reduced sentence. However, he consistently denied being involved in the attack and attempted murder of Martin. Lynette partially backed up his claims, stating she had hired a mercenary to confront Martin. Her intention, she said, was not to kill him but to scare him into relinquishing custody of their daughter. Being separated from her daughter made Lynette extremely miserable. She claimed that Martin did not allow her to see her daughter. Additionally, she alleged that she found evidence of Martin abusing her daughter. Lynette accused Martin of substance abuse and domestic violence. She also shared details about their relationship, stating that Martin had repeatedly beaten her, which led to their breakup. Lynette did not see him as a benefactor, said that he took advantage of her difficult circumstances when their daughter was born. He allegedly forced her to sign documents and formalize guardianship while she was helpless in prison. She believes Martin acted shamelessly in taking advantage of her situation. The interrogations of the two suspects, Lynette and Joseph, happened at the same time, but in different rooms to compare their stories. The investigators, having received information from Lynette, decided to confront Joseph. Initially, Joseph refused to tell the truth. However, once he learned that Lynette the crime was trying to turn him in to the police, Joseph changed his story. He claimed that Lynette had first approached him in 2007 with a request to kill Martin. Lynette didn't care how Martin died, she just wanted him gone forever. The plan was for Martin to disappear without any witnesses, and his body would be disposed of discreetly. But Lynette didn't expect Joseph to act in a dramatic manner. Joseph's story matched with what the police already knew. During the investigation, the police chose to disclose this information to observe Lynette's response. Lynette, however, cleverly refused to give a statement and asked for a lawyer. Prosecutors claimed that Lynette's main motive was her dissatisfaction with the decisions regarding her child's upbringing and restrictions on communicating with him. She tried to challenge custody in court but was unsuccessful. After that, Lynette didn't stop and decided to hire a hitman. Joseph Lover, 51 years old, was also charged with attempted murder. This man admitted his guilt and provided the police with a detailed report. The trial was full of surprises, starting when Joseph unexpectedly changed his earlier testimony during the hearing. He retracted his previous statements and took full responsibility for the incident, claiming that Lynette was not involved and that he was solely responsible for planning and executing the assassination attempt. It seemed like Joseph loved Lynette so much that he wanted to protect her. However, before the next stage of the hearing, Joseph shocked everyone again by reverting to his original story, asserting that Lynette had hired him as a hitman. To obtain these confessions Joseph's, the prosecution suggested a plea deal. In this case, the prosecutor's office re-entered the proceedings, aiming to demonstrate that Lynette had a justified motive. Lynette clearly disliked Martin due to dissatisfaction with custody arrangements. However, the prosecutor's office relied on very limited evidence. In reality, there was nothing concrete to directly implicate Lynette in the crime. There were no phone records or messages, and Joseph, the sole witness, was unreliable, which weakened the prosecution's position. Lynette's lawyer effectively used these weaknesses to persuade the jury of her innocence. On October 3rd of that year, Joseph confirmed to the jury that Lynette was the mastermind behind the plan to kill Martin. He confirmed that she had formulated the whole plan. However, his numerous contradictions and retractions during the testimony made the jury question his credibility. The defense then made a surprising move. According to Lynette, Martin was an abusive father who often physically harmed his daughter. She presented photos showing bruises on the child's arms and back as evidence. In response, Martin's family defended him by disputing these accusations. They suggested the photos only showed minor abrasions that a child might get accidentally, arguing they did not resemble signs of abuse. They even implied that Lynette herself might have caused the bruises. Despite the defenses put forward by Martin's relatives, Lynette successfully raised doubts in the jury's minds, she portraying herself as a victim. This thing aimed to make Martin's murder seem like an act of kindness in protection of the child. In the end, the lawyers portrayed her accomplice, Joseph, as a true hero. They argued that Joseph was protecting Lynette and her daughter. Lynette did not ask for Martin to be killed, she only wanted to scare him. However, Joseph, a seasoned criminal, believed he was rescuing the girl from cruelty and tyranny, which led him to kill Martin. Additionally, the defense argued that Lynette could not have planned the murder herself, because if that had happened, she would likely have faced life in prison. This was inconsistent with the image of a loving, caring mother seeking custody of her child. Now, the jury had to make a decision in this complicated case. On October 5, 2007, after lengthy discussions, the jury announced the verdict in this case. Lynette was found guilty of orchestrating the attack. Her extravagant lifestyle and criminal record worked against her. The jury didn't believe the lawyer who portrayed Martin as an abuser involved in domestic violence against the child. In fact, there was no evidence to support these claims. Lynette's family was shocked by the jury's verdict. Initially, Lynette was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 50 years, but the sentence was later changed. However, the judge considered Lynette to be a socially dangerous person. He sincerely expressed his hope that no parole board would ever decide to release the woman. Lynette remains in the Huron Correctional Facility for Women. She has served enough of her sentence to apply for parole and has submitted a petition. Lynette is hopeful about being released soon, but no decision has been made yet. Martin's family hopes she will never be released. Her accomplice, Joseph, received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Tasha Morton. Dwayne Barrentine was a single father raising his 6-year-old son. Nothing is known about the child's mother. In June 2007, Dwayne and his son lived in the suburbs of Marianna, a small, sunny town in Florida, USA. Although Dwayne worked full-time to provide for his son, he made sure to spend as much time as possible with him on weekends. His parents helped care for the boy, and he also took his son to kindergarten, but the child missed having a mother's care, which concerned Dwayne. He often heard his son pray before bed, wishing for a mother. Dwayne decides to search for a suitable woman who can become his wife and a loving mother to his son. When Dwayne was picking up his son from kindergarten one day, a new teacher handed him a note with her phone number. Curiously, he asked whose number it was, and the woman said it was hers. Dwayne realized she was flirting with him. Attracted by the beautiful blonde, he took the chance and called her. During the conversation, they discovered that they had a lot in common. Tasha was also a single mother, newly moved to the city with her 6-year-old daughter, Lexi. At the time, Tasha was 31 years old and worked as a kindergarten teacher. When Dwayne and Tasha started dating, Tasha's daughter and Dwayne's son were the same age and quickly became friends. Lexi even called Dwayne Dad, which he was touched by. Tasha's daughter was a child from her previous marriage, a subject she did not want to discuss. Her private nature did not affect the couple in the early stages of their relationship. Within weeks, Lexi started calling Dwayne Daddy, and he really loved Lexi. Soon after, they moved in together, in Dwayne's house. He was delighted with his new partner. She was a beautiful and charming woman who showed her love through small, thoughtful gestures. It seemed like they had found each other and had a happy future ahead of them. Dwayne told his old friends and relatives that he loved her very much. To him, Tasha seemed perfect. However, not everyone was happy with their relationship. Dwayne's mother criticized him for rushing into a relationship and moving in together so quickly. She thought they should get to know each other better. But Dwayne, ignored his mother's advice. Tasha says she doesn't want to discuss her past because of past hurts. Dwayne chose not to press her for more details to avoid upsetting her. Over time, as more stories about Tasha's past came to light, Dwayne noticed more and more inconsistencies. Some of the stories seemed particularly strange. Tasha claimed that her grandfather was a federal judge who died in a battery explosion and that she was supposed to inherit a large sum of money. However, there was no inheritance, and attempts to verify her stories were unsuccessful, even though such a significant event should have been easy to confirm. As they continued to live together, Dwayne noticed that Tasha often made up stories about her living. This worried him, so he decided to investigate further to learn more about her past. While searching the internet, he discovers that Tasha's first husband was a man named Mitch Kemp, but he was not her only husband. Dwayne uncovered that by age 31, she had been married 5 times, which Dwayne found unusual. And Mitch is Lexi's father. After much persuasion, Tasha finally confides in Dwayne, admitting that her marriage to Mitch was a mistake. She sees him as a friend and has no romantic feelings for him. Despite Dwayne's efforts, he is unable to find Mitch Kemp to gather more information about Tasha. Mitch seems to have disappeared. Tasha mentions that she has not heard from Mitch in years and has not attempted to contact him, which Dwayne finds strange. Dwayne eventually contacted Jones, one of Tasha's ex-husbands. He agreed to meet and talk. Dwayne shared that Tasha was hesitant to share her past with him, so she often made up stories about her life. Jones then revealed something to Dwayne that shocked him. Jones said that Tasha, while drunk, confessed that she was involved in the murder of one of her ex-husbands. According to Jones, Tasha had had a few drinks that night, which made her more talkative. According to Tasha, Mitch raped her daughter. She could not forgive him for this act. At the time, Tasha was married to another man named Greg Morton. She told him about the incident and Greg became extremely angry. Instead of reporting Mitch to the police, they decided to take matters into their own hands. Together, they planned to kill Mitch. Tasha lures Mitch to her new home and Greg waits for Mitch there, shooting him multiple times in the heart. Jones did not believe his wife's story because it seemed like she was making it up. Because she told it while she was drunk, which is why he did not go to the police. However, Dwayne became suspicious because he could not find any contact information for Mitch, Lexi's biological father, whom she had married before Greg. He suspected that Mitch might be dead. This caused Dwayne to reconsider the facts he had heard and began searching for information. However, he could not find any evidence linking Tasha to the murder. So he continued living with Tasha. Despite his concerns, he decided to ignore the situation to ensure his son had a loving mother. She was very loving and caring towards him, which made him doubt Jones' story, so he stopped looking for more information. The couple planned their wedding. After a few months, Dwayne discovered that Tasha was cheating on him. They had an argument, and he kicked her out of the house. Feeling hurt, Dwayne decided to continue his investigation into her past. He went to her MySpace page, where he found a number of unread messages. People were asking if the account belonged to Mitch's ex-wife and wanted to know where she was. According to Mitch's relatives, Mitch had been missing for about 4 years and they had been looking for him the entire time. These messages worried Dwayne, piqued his interest in the story, and motivated him to continue his investigation. Dwayne reviewed all the information he had gathered. He noticed that Lexi's birth certificate bore the last name Kemp. Tasha had married Mitch shortly before she married Greg. One of Tasha's other ex-husbands, Jones, revealed that Tasha and Greg were involved in a conspiracy and that Mitch's murder was a disturbing fact. However, Dwayne could not take any further action as the clues to uncover the truth had run out. Dwayne went to the Marianne Police Department and told the sheriff his story. The police officers listened carefully and were interested in the part involving Mitch Kemp. They started an investigation and asked Dwayne to keep it secret to avoid alarming Tasha. The police believed they were dealing with a murder case and even had suspects. This situation was unprecedented for the town's police, as it was the first time a civilian had independently used social networks to uncover clues to solve an old crime. The police were particularly impressed by Dwayne's accuracy in determining the dates and times of events. He showed a natural talent for investigation. However, the police still have to continue investigating on their own, using every clue to investigate the case. Police initially spoke with Jones, who told Dwayne the same story about Tasha's plot. The conversation was recorded. Police also contacted Mitch Kemp's relatives, who live thousands of miles away in Boone County, Missouri. From his relatives, police were able to glean important information about the circumstances and timing of Mitch's disappearance. Mitch's family has always suspected Tasha of being involved in his disappearance. At this point, Tasha was 26 years old, and Mitch was almost 11 years her senior. Some people began to doubt her sincerity because she was much younger and very attractive. At first, their relationship seemed perfect, but soon Tasha became controlling and ignored his wishes and those of his family. Mitch, normally gentle and kind, put up with her behavior and became an easy target for manipulation. Despite this, their relationship continued. In 2002, the couple had a daughter and later got married. Unfortunately, their marriage was not long-lasting or happy. They faced financial problems and their relationship was very complicated. This unstable situation could not last. After 8 months, the marriage ended. Tasha left with her daughter. Not wanting to be a single mother, she met Greg Morton before her divorce was finalized. They started dating and she moved in with him along. They were married just 6 months after meeting. Mitch Kemp was very upset because he still loved Tasha and wanted to reconcile with her. However, Tasha refused to return to him, prompting Mitch to pursue joint custody of their daughter by filing a lawsuit. When he informed Tasha, she became very angry, especially after Mitch threatened to seek full custody. In August 2004, Mitch shared this conversation with his brother, also revealing that during their last meeting, Tasha had hit and spat at him. Just 2 weeks later, Mitch vanished without a trace. His brother tried to reach out to Tasha, suspecting she might know Mitch's whereabouts given their serious conflict over divorce and custody. Tasha denied any knowledge of Mitch's location and subsequently ignored all communication from his family. Meanwhile, she continued to pay her bills using funds from Mitch's bank account. Mitch's family was unable to find him, so they contacted the Boone County Sheriff's Department. Unfortunately, the search was unsuccessful and Mitch disappeared without a trace. The investigation reached a dead end and the case was archived without any active involvement. The police found no evidence or confirmation that Tasha and Greg were involved in Mitch's disappearance or murder. About 4 years later, in 2008, the police finally got Dwayne's story. The police believed Mitch was no longer alive. But they had no body, no murder weapon, and no crime scene. Ideally, they need a confession and the police need to talk to Tasha. So the police began looking for Tasha. When the police found her, they invited her to the station for questioning. When she arrived at the police station, Tasha expressed her desire to cooperate with the police. She was unaware that the police already knew about the murder story she had told Jones. She said she was not surprised by Mitch's disappearance, given his bad character, and suggested that someone might have sought revenge against him. When asked about her second husband, she mentioned that she had divorced Greg a long time ago and had little contact with him, knowing nothing about his current situation. Tasha also denied any involvement in Mitch's disappearance. However, the police believed they were on the right track and continued to pressure her to confess. Tasha initially described Greg as a normal, unremarkable person. However, as the police asked more questions, a darker side to Greg's personality emerged. He seemed intimidating, as Tasha began to describe him as aggressive and short-tempered. The police eventually convinced Tasha to confess that Greg had killed Mitch. According to her narrative, one day when she was not home, Mitch came over to discuss custody of their daughter. A heated argument broke out between Mitch and Greg, which escalated into a fight. During the fight, Greg pulled out a gun and shot Mitch several times in the chest. This incident occurred in August 2004. Tasha believes that there may have been hostility between Greg and Mitch, as Greg was extremely jealous and suspected her of having an affair with Mitch. Tasha had anticipated this possibility but hoped it would not come to pass. Fortunately, her daughter was not home at the time of the murder. She assured the police that she was not involved, did not encourage Greg to commit the murder, and did not turn him against Mitch, her ex-husband. She claimed that she only learned about the incident when Greg confessed to her, detailing how he shot Mitch. Tasha also provided information about where to find Mitch's body. Mitch's body was believed to be at the old farm, although she did not know the exact location. The farm was a large area, about 15 hectares, and had been sold after the murder. The old house had been demolished, and a new house had been built elsewhere, making it impossible to recreate the crime scene, which greatly hindered the search for the body. Despite Tasha's claims of innocence, the police began to suspect her, especially because of Jones's account of her presence at the crime scene and she had lured Mitch to meet the killer. This story warranted a thorough investigation, but could not proceed without the body being found. Tasha cooperated fully with the police. She agreed to travel with them from Florida to Missouri to search for Mitch's body on a farm. When she arrived, she was confused because the area had changed dramatically. Everything had been rebuilt and a new family was living there. As they walked around, Tasha focused on the location of the old house. Even though the buildings were destroyed, she confidently pointed out the location. However, the police found nothing there with their equipment, leading them to suspect that she might be lying. The police believed that Tasha should have known exactly where Mitch's body was. The search for the body on the farm continued. Despite the efforts of the searchers, they were still unable to find anything. After 5 weeks of painstaking and fruitless work, Tasha was questioned again, with the police applying even more pressure. This was to be expected, as they had excavated a large area without finding a single clue. At that moment, Tasha suddenly remembered a large hole being dug on the farm. Greg had buried the body there shortly after he told her about the murder. Tasha was able to point out the location on a map. The police focused their efforts on this spot, and within half an hour of digging, the police found human remains wrapped in a tarp. The body was quickly taken for forensic analysis, which confirmed that the remains belonged to Mitch Kemp, who had been reported missing. Forensic experts determined that he was murdered, finding 6 bullets in his chest that caused instant death. Mitch was shot at point-blank range, leaving him with no chance of survival. 3 weeks after his body was discovered, police arrested Greg Morton in St. Louis and charged him with first-degree murder. Police hoped he would denounce his ex-wife, Tasha, whom they suspected was also involved in the crime. However, Greg remained silent. Police believed that keeping him in custody would persuade him to talk, but this strategy failed. Even after spending months in jail, Greg still did not testify against Tasha. Despite this, police chose to arrest Tasha out of concern she might flee. Although the investigation lacked solid evidence, relying only on a witness statement, she was charged with first-degree murder. Tasha was arrested in the city. She later gave a different account of Mitch's death. She explained that she had indeed taken Mitch to the farm but claimed that she had no intention of leading him into a trap, as she did not know. Tasha intended to give Mitch pictures of their daughter at kindergarten and wanted to talk to him. However, Greg found out about them together. He approached with a gun and pointed it at Mitch. Before she could react, Greg shot Mitch 6 times in the chest. She believed Greg acted out of jealousy. After the shooting stopped, Greg pinned her against the wall, blaming her for provoking him and causing Mitch's death. She wanted to call the police, but it was too late to help Mitch. Greg forced her to be quiet and then disposed of the body by burying it in a large hole. Surprisingly, after these violent events, Tasha and Greg lived together for about a year and a half before they divorced. The police were baffled. How could she continue living with the man who killed the father of her child? However, Tasha explained that she feared ending the relationship would put her in danger. 3 weeks after Tasha was arrested, Greg finally spoke up and shared his account of the tragic events with the police. Greg admitted to shooting Mitch but claimed he was manipulated by his ex-wife. He said Tasha had told him about the rape and was seeking revenge. Greg insists that if it weren't for her urging, he wouldn't have hurt Mitch. Despite Greg's claims, Tasha maintained her innocence. In June 2010, nearly 6 years after Mitch's disappearance, Tasha Morton went to trial. Tasha's lawyers argued that she was a victim, trapped in an abusive relationship with violent Greg, who they said killed Mitch and threatened her into silence. Greg's defense argued that Tasha was responsible for the murder. They claimed that she had convinced Greg, her devoted second husband, to kill Mitch, with whom she was fighting for custody of their child. Tasha maintained to the end that she had nothing to do with the crime. However, the prosecution was certain that her manipulations caused the tragic event. The main evidence was the confession of Greg, the killer, who had accepted a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence for second-degree murder. The court ultimately sentenced Greg Morton to 19 years in prison. Tasha's defense claimed that Greg had fabricated the story to get a reduced sentence. They argued that Greg had acted out of jealousy, leading him to shoot the innocent victim, Mitch. During the trial, a neighbor who lived near the couple at the time of the incident testified. He described Greg as domineering, asserting complete control over his wife and demanding that she follow his orders without question. It was clear that Tasha feared Greg and was unable to manipulate him. Then, Tasha's ex-husband, Jones, became a key witness. He recounted a story that Tasha had shared while drunk during their marriage, claiming that she had invited Mitch to the farm with the intention of killing him. However, Tasha denied that this conversation ever happened, claiming that Jones learned the story from Greg, not her. She believes Jones is protecting Greg. Besides listening to the testimony, the jury had to watch over 8 hours of interrogation footage. Tasha's lawyer believed she would be acquitted. The jury recognized that she had cooperated with the investigation from the start, helped in the search, and without her, Mitch's body might never have been found. Her defense argued that if Tasha were involved in her ex-husband's death, she wouldn't have led police to this clue. However, Tasha may have had a motive, as Mitch was fighting for custody of their child. Tasha claimed that Mitch saw Lexi regularly, and they never fought over custody. After 8 hours of deliberations, the jury returned to the courtroom and found Tasha Morton guilty of first-degree murder. The jury explained their decision by noting that Tasha's story had changed several times, while Greg's story remained consistent. They concluded that Tasha had lied and manipulated Greg into killing Mitch. The verdict came as a complete shock to Tasha. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tasha attempted to appeal her sentence, but her efforts were unsuccessful. Mitch's family celebrated the verdict, feeling that justice had finally been served. Hello, Crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sarah Starr. On November 27, 2017, at approximately 9 a.m., the Sherry County Sheriff's Department in Alabama, United States, received a call from a witness who believed her friend had taken her own life. Police were dispatched to a home owned by a local church. The home had previously been the pastor's residence but had recently been rented out exclusively to church members. The tenant at the time of the incident was Sarah Starr, a recently divorced mother of 3. At 38, she had been married for 16 years, but her relationship had hit a rough patch, leading her to make the difficult decision to divorce. Sarah was at a turning point in her life, facing the challenges of being a single parent without her husband's support. She had to take on all parental responsibilities, including providing for the needs of the children since her husband did not help at first. However, without her husband constantly pressuring her, her situation seemed to improve. Life became easier for her. Sarah Starr was born in 1979 in the small town of LBI, Kansas, USA. She is a doting mother. She easily manages and cares for her children. She is a teacher at a local elementary school where she teaches literature. Sarah loves her job. People describe her as knowledgeable and calm, with the ability to engage and inspire students. Sarah's marriage to Jason began in February 2001 when she was 22 years old and had just graduated with a bachelor's degree in education. Jason, who was 28, had recently returned from military service. He had previously been married and had a son, but after facing disagreements with his first wife, they divorced. He was immediately drawn to Sarah's kindness and beauty. Initially, their marriage seemed stable and happy, and Sarah often shared how well things were going. However, there were growing concerns among friends and family about Jason's behavior. Many noticed that he would frequently insult and humiliate her in public. After 5 years of marriage, the couple had twins, then another set of twins, which was quite a rare event. She was overjoyed to become a mother of 4, but Jason was unhappy. The couple lived in a small town of Colby, Kansas, where they grew up, but they decided to move to Alabama. They rented a house in their new home and Jason found a job. In addition to his main job, he started a business. Meanwhile, Sarah became a stay-at-home mother, taking care of 4 young children and managing household chores. It was a lot of work, but she did it well. However, Jason's income was not enough, so Sarah took on a part-time job at a school. This increased her workload while her husband did not provide much support. Sarah found a strong community of believers and became an active member of her local Baptist church. Her easygoing, outgoing personality helped her settle into her new environment. In 2016, she became a 4th-grade teacher at a nearby elementary school. People described her as a very positive and friendly woman. However, behind her cheerful exterior, she faced difficulties, especially after she gave birth to her second set of twins. Jason felt overwhelmed. He often lost his temper with Sarah because of the noise from the children, lack of sleep, and the mess they made. Sarah admitted that she was exhausted by this marriage. She decided to divorce and moved into a house provided by the church for a small fee and began the divorce process. Because of Jason's business, along with the division of assets and child custody, the divorce process could drag on for years. Fortunately, she had the support of her church, which helped her through the difficult times. Although Sarah was a devoted mother and managed her responsibilities well, the ongoing hardships took a toll on her mental health. She became increasingly anxious, frequently arguing with her husband, with Jason saying that Sarah focused on spending his money on unnecessary items and was addicted to shopping. This behavior worsened after their divorce, leading to significant financial difficulties. These made it difficult for her to sleep and she suffered from mild depression. When Sarah decided to move out of the house she shared with Jason, she asked her friends, Dana and Lawrence, a married couple, for help. They later remembered how anxious Sarah seemed during the move. She hurriedly tried to load her belongings into the car but kept forgetting items, forcing her to run back and forth from the house to the street multiple times. This frantic behavior raised suspicions about her mental state. Sarah was particularly worried that Jason might return while she was moving, as she didn't want him to find out and interfere. When Sarah and her friends arrived at her new home, Jason appeared. Lawrence then asked Jason not to enter, and Jason complied. Jason lingered near the house for a while before leaving. Lawrence recalled that when Jason appeared, Sarah was very scared. She was shaking and crying, and she had been suffering from stress and anxiety for a long time. She truly believed that Jason had come to harm her, especially since he had previously threatened her with violence if she asked for help. 2 years later, the divorce was finalized. They decided to share custody of their children. At that time, their twins were 12 and 7 years old. Jason was also ordered to pay monthly child support to all 4 children and his wife, who was still struggling financially. The divorce had a significant impact on Jason's finances. He was ordered to pay $3,000. At the time, Jason was earning over $6,000 a month, meaning the court ordered him to pay half of his income to Sarah. However, she did not receive any of his assets, so she continued to live in the church. Jason also moved out, but to a house near his ex-wife's house, where he now lives with his mother. On November 27, 2017, Sarah was expected to return to work after Thanksgiving, but she did not show up for class that morning, which was very unusual for her. Colleagues were unable to contact her as she did not respond to messages on various platforms, raising concern about her behavior. Some teachers speculated that something serious might have occurred. Consequently, a colleague was sent to check on her. Tragically, at around 8:30 a.m., they discovered Sarah outside her home with multiple gunshot wounds. Police determined that Sarah was likely the victim of a violent attack. They found that she had left her home around 6:30 a.m. to go to work but was shot in the chest shortly after. An unknown assailant had fired a shotgun at close range, also wounding her in the head. Neighbors later informed the police that they had heard gunfire that morning. However, since it was a rural area where hunting was common, they did not think much. In these regions, residents often use firearms for hunting or to deter wild animals. Forensic experts found no fingerprints or tire marks at the crime scene. However, it was soon discovered that Sarah had just gone through a complicated divorce from her husband, which aroused the police's suspicions. Initial witnesses, Dana and Lawrence, told police that Sarah's divorce followed a difficult marriage. During the final months of the divorce proceedings, Sarah expressed fear of her husband, believing that he might try to harm her. Jason lived only a few minutes' walk from her rented home. With this information, the police began to focus on the prime suspect, Jason. He was brought in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in Sarah's murder. He was released a few hours later when his alibi was confirmed. He had breakfast at a restaurant with his children, as evidenced by surveillance camera footage and witness testimony. Although Jason was released, suspicions surrounding him remained as Jason had a strong motive to harm Sarah. Furthermore, Sarah's friends and family confirmed that she was terrified of Jason. A press conference was held to update the public on the investigation, during which it was announced that the state governor had offered a $5,000 reward for any information leading to Sarah's killer. A local resident later added another $500 to the reward fund. Unfortunately, these efforts were fruitless. Police asked for the public's help in providing vital information to help move the case forward, but no leads came up and the case stalled for years. The local sheriff's department cooperated with the state police. However, the case remained stalled until December 2021. Police believe Jason was involved in the crime, possibly hiring a killer. He had a motive, as he had to pay more than half of his income to his ex-wife and children. It is believed that financial disputes led to the murder, and although he tried to gain full custody of the children, he was unsuccessful in court. While searching Jason's computer, police discovered a manuscript for a book he planned to publish. The manuscript contained chapters discussing his relationship with Sarah. Jason expressed a strong desire to avoid paying her the court-ordered amount and considered ways to avoid paying her. His writings included many derogatory comments about Sarah and women in general, which added to the police's suspicions of him. Additionally, police reviewed Jason's financial transactions and discovered that between September 7th and November 15th, the year Sarah was murdered, he made 7 transactions totaling $2,600. These transactions were made between Jason and a person named Lily. The investigation revealed that Lily was friends with Jason's brother, Darren, and that they had no further financial interactions. Through discussions with Lily, police learned that Jason had gifted his brother Darren a 2016 motorcycle, which was a costly item. The reason behind such an expensive gift was unclear, especially since Jason did not seem to have the financial means to afford it. He defended his actions by saying that he had been in an accident, but chose not to report it to the police. Instead, Jason gave his damaged bike to Darren to repair. Darren estimated the cost of the repairs at $5,000. Jason decided to send the money through Darren's friend, Lily. The total amount transferred was $2,600, which Jason claimed was for the motorcycle repairs. However, police suspect that this may actually have been a way to repay a debt to Darren, who may have been involved in the attack and death of Sarah. It is believed that Lily was used to conceal payments for the crime and help conceal their involvement. His brother, Darren, is described as a difficult person who had a difficult life in Texas. Darren has a criminal record that includes a 2013 speeding arrest in which illegal drugs were found. Although he received a short sentence for drug possession, this history has raised suspicions about his possible involvement in more serious crimes. Police investigated the brothers' communications and data, including seizing their cell phones. They identified Darren as the new prime suspect in Sarah's case. He traveled to Alabama just before Thanksgiving 2017. Darren arrived in the area on November 18th and stayed for 10 days, often staying near Sarah's home. Darren's location was tracked, showing he was near the church and turned off his mobile phone around midnight, just before Sarah's murder. This behavior suggested he was watching the Sarah and trying to hide his location from the police. His phone was back on around 10 a.m. the next day, back in Texas. Later that day, he sent Jason a coded message about a successful deer hunt, indicating they were using coded language to communicate. One of Sarah's neighbors reported seeing a motorcycle that looked like Jason's near her house several times before the murder. Shortly after the crime, the same motorcycle was spotted leaving the area, which added to the evidence. Based on this information, police determined that Jason had hired Darren to kill his ex-wife, leading to serious charges against both men. In December 2021, Jason requested a lawyer and denied any involvement in the crime, confidently asserting that the police would have no evidence against him. However, he later confessed to killing Sarah, repeatedly stating that he was guilty. Despite his confession, he was released on bail pending a hearing, requiring him to wear an ankle monitor. His trial is set for June 27, 2022. Darren's situation was quite complex. He went into hiding, prompting a nationwide FBI manhunt. His photo was widely distributed, and initially, a $10,000 reward was offered for information leading to his capture, which later increased to $22,500. On February 5, 2022, Darren turned himself in Texas. He chose not to plead guilty and waived his right to wait for the hearing while under house arrest, instead opting to stay in prison until the trial started. Throughout this period, Jason and Darren frequently spoke on the phone, but their conversations were monitored, and they did not discuss anything that could be used against them. The preparation of the case was delayed because there was a lot of circumstantial evidence but not enough direct evidence. After the police completed their investigation, on September 11, 2023, the trial of Jason Starr and Darren Starr finally began. The prosecution aimed to determine Jason's financial motive, emphasizing that he did not want to pay more than half of his income to Sarah. They presented substantial circumstantial evidence, including Jason's contact with Darren's brother in Texas, his use of his motorcycle to travel to Alabama, and the transfer of money. Lily claimed that she was not involved in any wrongdoing. According to her statement, she was unaware of what Jason and Darren were doing and was surprised to learn she could be seen as being an accomplice to the crime. Eventually, it was decided not to pursue any charges against Lily. The attorney pointed out that there was a lack of strong evidence. There was no murder weapon found and there were no witnesses to the attack in person or recorded on surveillance cameras. Jason's computer notes appear to be an expression of his emotions and frustration after losing custody of his children and facing significant financial burdens. These notes reflected his emotional state and not any intent to kill. Therefore, none of this could be considered direct evidence of a desire to kill. During the 10 days Darren was in Alabama, the brothers did not speak to each other. They may have used disposable phones purchased online to communicate. The lack of any physical evidence at the scene of the massacre, such as shoe prints, fingerprints, DNA, or even motorcycle tire tracks. In addition, the lawyer also presented a video showing Jason having breakfast with his children in a restaurant 10 kilometers from Sarah's house, which happened at the same time the attackers shot Sarah. Jason fully cooperated with the investigation from the beginning by allowing police to search his cell phone and computer. His attorney highlighted this point, trying to convince the jury that a true criminal would never allow such a search, especially if they knew about the evidence against them. However, this argument was not convincing, especially given Jason's behavior and his confession after his arrest. The trial lasted 6 days. The jury then spent 6 hours deliberating their verdict. Ultimately, the jury decided that Jason Starr and Darren Starr were guilty of murder and conspiracy to murder. On January 4, 2024, both were sentenced to life in prison without parole and ordered to pay a $25,000 fine. Darren's attorney later announced plans to appeal the verdict, while Jason's defense attorney remained silent on the matter due to Jason's confession to the murder. The children were placed in the care of Sarah's parents. In court, the older twin expressed a desire to cut ties with their father, stating that they no longer wanted to see him,